What is up, Snugglebug Strangers?
Oh, wow.
I know, it showed up in my list, and I'm like, that's a key word, so I'm going to go with Snugglebug, because the other ones were all bad.
I mean,
Self-centered strangers,
oh, yeah.
slimy strangers, so we're going to go with
Just
Snugglebug
rude.
Strangers.
I'm sure
That's kinda
someone is snuggling right now
That's
as
kinda
they
cute.
listen to our
Yep.
podcast.
Yep.
That's sweet.
If you've never been here before, we apologize in advance.
You might want to just turn around and head back out.
Yeah, you can do our spiel for go to the...
Oh, yeah. If you came here for a topic, you're going to have to sit through some stuff first. But if you don't want to sit through some stuff first, just hit pause, check the show notes. We'll post the actual timestamp of the topic start.
And if you came
We're
here
going to
for...
do a taste test. We're going to welcome new strangers to
Yes.
the face. If you don't want to hear any of that, just skip over
And
it.
if you came here for a well-researched topic, then you might just want to go to a different podcast, I think.
Hey, you do good research.
I do so research. I thought we had stuff for housekeeping, but I don't have anything down for housekeeping. So while I'm doing shout-outs, think if there's any housekeeping.
We could talk about our day trip that we kept teasing on the socials.
Yeah, we could. Shout-outs to our two newest strangers who joined our closed Facebook group called The Strangers. Those are Laura McCormick and Maria Santo Stefano.
Welcome.
So thank you guys so much for joining. And just a shout-out to the world, man. Just giving a shout-out to the world.
Shout out to the world.
Because the world's going to hell in a handbasket. It just needs all the good intentions it can get, I guess. You can talk about our little road trip.
Yeah, so if you are following us on the socials, and by that I mean Facebook and Instagram, although allegedly we have a TikTok. I'm
just
not
never
sure
do
Kurt ever posts to it.
No,
but
and I need to
fine.
post to it. We need to do more little videos, like little introductory videos. But today we're like kind of rushing
We can
around.
barely manage to get through this.
Yeah, we're rushing around today.
We are. I'm on a schedule today.
Oh, I want to give a shout out to Brian Young because he sent me the nifty Transatlantic History Ramblings hat that he posted something on Facebook for the podcast, and at the end he said, "See you next Wednesday," and then he put in parentheses, he said, a prize to whoever tells me what that reference is about. And I knew it without having to look it up.
So what is it?
Well, I'll tell you in a second. But I knew it without looking it up, and I was sure somebody else was going to comment on it, and nobody did. And then the next day, I messaged him, and I'm like, I told him what it was, and he's like, just say it. Nobody else did. It is a reference to See You Next Wednesday is like a John Landis trademark in his movies.
Okay.
Like, apparently...
Who's John Landis?
He did the Blues Brothers.
Oh, okay.
All those movies. But
sure.
See You Next Wednesday was just a random line in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh.
And for some reason, he grabbed onto that line, and it shows up in all the stuff he does. Like in the Blues Brothers, it's on a billboard that the police are sitting behind.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
In the Thriller video, in Michael Jackson's Thriller video, at the beginning when him and his girlfriend are in the theater, you can hear someone on the movie screen say it.
He did that video?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you can hear someone on the movie screen say it. So it's like a trademark. So I just knew that randomly.
Little Easter eggs.
So I commented that, and he sent me the cap. So
and Kurt is a frequent guest on that podcast.
Yes, and I'm going on again this week. I think Tim and I are going on this week.
Cool.
Talk about gins, I believe.
Gin. It's a fun topic.
It is, but we'll get into. Well, I'll save this.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that today. But
we haven't done that in a while.
No,
I haven't been Kurted in a while.
You haven't been Kurted in a while.
Quickly, our road trip.
Oh yeah.
So, we posted a picture hinting that we were doing a little road trip, but we took a day trip to Whitewater.
Yes.
Wisconsin.
That will be our next episode.
It'll be our next episode topic, and it also happens to be the place where I met the love of my life 27 years ago. So it was kind of fun.
It was
seeing
cool.
Where Jim and I met,
like
the apartment
really
building
cool
we lived in. Yeah,
I'll have more to say about the trip when we have that episode.
We'll talk
but it
more
was cool. It wasn't as
fruitful
because,
from a paranormal perspective.
But we'll get into that in the next episode too. I just curded myself episode away.
Yeah, you did. It was a fun trip though.
It was
worth the effort, even if we didn't get much.
Yeah, a little weirdness coming back.
Yeah, I still can't. We'll talk about that in the episode.
Yeah,
I have to remind you to tell your friend's story.
Oh, so we're gonna do this.
I remembered.
Thank you. So we're gonna do this super quick. It's just he's a very good friend of mine. He listens to the podcast religiously.
Hi, friend.
He said to keep their names out of it because it's family stuff.
Yeah.
But he texted me the other night and he said, "Explain this." So what happened was they live in Wisconsin and it's him and his wife, and they have a teenage son and a teenage daughter. And because they're teenagers that are heavily involved in sports, they are constantly shuttling the kids
Sure.
back and forth to stuff.
Sounds like a nightmare. Go on.
So this night, they arranged to meet at a park and ride, and they were going to exchange kids. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
one kid get in the other car.
Yeah.
So it was my buddy and his daughter in his truck.
Okay.
So they pulled into the park and ride, and then they backed into the slot. So they're sitting there, and then his wife and the son pulled into this park and ride in their car, and they drove up to the truck, and they were looking at the truck, and my friend and his daughter were in the truck waving to them, and then the two of them just kept going, and they pulled into a spot at the end of the park and ride. And my buddy and his son and his daughter were like, "What's going on?"
That's
So the daughter
weird.
got out of the truck.
It's very missing for
The daughter got out of the truck and was waving to them outside the truck, and then they saw her, and they had like a puzzled look on their face. So then the wife and the son drove over, and it came out that when they pulled in, they looked at the truck, and there was nobody in the cab of the truck. They could see straight through to the seat. There was nobody in there. And my buddy and his daughter were waving to them, like frantically waving to them from inside. And the wife and the son swear to this day that the other two had gotten out of the truck and hid behind it just to mess with them. And he didn't. He said they were in the truck waving to them, but to them looking into the truck, there was absolutely nobody there. And it was the fact that they could see straight through to the seat that there was nobody there. He said there was no weird glare because of where the sun was, and they swear that there was absolutely nobody sitting in the truck, even though the two of them are in there waving.
And I'm assuming they were just a few feet in front of them.
Yeah.
I'm shook by this.
I'm shook by it too, and then he said that
is
they're convinced
weird.
they're still convinced that the two of them got out of the truck, hid behind the truck, and then slid back into the truck, and they didn't. So is it like a weird, like I said, the only thing I can think of is that it was some kind of weird sun thing where it looked like they were looking into the cab of the truck, but they weren't, or it was just a weird glitch in reality.
Do they have any missing time?
No.
Okay.
we might have a little missing time from our trip.
Weird.
That was weird.
We'll talk about
But yeah,
that.
that was the story I wanted to say. So yeah, he sent me that, and I'm like, dude, I don't know. I was trying to come up with logical explanations for it, and he said, no, they swear.
The only thing would be a glare of some kind.
Yeah, but
if they swear there wasn't.
No, because they could see
or
the
if they
seat.
were far away.
Yeah, and they weren't.
I
but
imagine
they could
they're
see the
driving
seat.
right by the truck.
If they were sitting in the seat, but the person could still see the seat, empty
Yeah.
seat, that's what's weird. And I don't know. I think reality is like kind
That
of
is
falling apart. I really
weird.
do. I think there's just
That would mess with me.
I think there's a lot of glitching lately. So that was the story I wanted to tell.
Okay.
Okay.
Start out with a bang.
Yeah. So
Taste test?
yeah, do we have anything else?
I don't
No,
think
because
so.
we should get this going because I think this is going to be a 2-hour episode. And this doesn't even, there's even more stuff. This is going to be like a part 1
Okay.
because there's so many.
I'm excited about this.
I
topic.
am too, but I want to get to the stories because it's the stories, like the Reddit stories, that fascinate me.
Cool.
And again, if even one of them is real, it's like, wow.
What's going
Yeah.
on?
So are you ready?
Taste test.
So I saw reviews of this online, and a lot of people said they got diabetes just smelling it. So it's
Okay.
very sweet.
Very sweet.
Corey got us this when they were on their trip.
Okay.
I'm excited because I wanted to try it. Because back in the day when I
we have
worked,
that box from Michaela too.
yeah,
Dang it. Well,
next time.
next time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Um,
We're running low on time today.
yeah. So I saw this online, and I'm like, I want to try that because I used to like a variation of this a lot back in the day. But you can there you go.
Unveil it.
Yep.
Jim said I need to get better. Oh, Bazooka, like the gum.
Bazooka bubblegum soda.
Jim said I need to get better. See, there's a glare. I don't know how. Oh, that might be better. He's like, every time you hold something up to the TV, nobody can see it. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I try.
Like how? Can't.
Because there's a glare. It's too far away. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But the cameras are where they are. What the heck?
But everybody says this is ungodly sweet. But when I worked at the grocery store, there was a Hubba Bubba bubblegum soda that I used to love. That was one of my
Bubba.
go-tos, was a Hubba Bubba bubblegum soda.
Hubba Bubba Bubblegum.
Hubba Bubba bubblegum soda.
Is it a twisty?
Oh, we're going to find out.
I don't think it is, because usually it has like a thing on the top. Hubba Bubba
Oh, it is a
Bubblegum.
twisty.
We keep saying it. It's Bazooka. The rectangular. You don't have your. Oh, it's right there.
Oh, I got it.
I was gonna say Jim left us a bottle opener. What a guy.
You should keep him.
I should. By the way, Jim and I are going on a double date to Holy Hill today.
Woohoo!
Which we
had
did
an episode
on that.
Oh yeah.
We are going to a flea market and then out to eat at Fox and
I
Hound.
loved Holy Hill.
Yeah, it's a really cool place.
That was where Aaron and I went for our episode last season. And Aaron and I are still trying to think of where we want to go this season.
Wow, this smells like bazooka
It
bubblegum.
totally does smell. I love bazooka bubblegum, but with my teeth, now it's hard to eat because when you start eating bazooka bubblegum, it is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard to get.
You got to break it down.
But everybody says this is sweet as
wow.
heck.
Okay. I'm ready. You ready?
It totally
Yeah.
smells like you could not make it smell any more like
No.
bazooka bubblegum. You ready?
Okay.
Oh. Oh.
It's actually not as sweet as I thought it was going to be.
No, it's super carbonated.
It really tastes like the gum.
It does.
Big
It
time.
has like a really good aftertaste.
I mean, I don't love it. I'm going to be honest. There's something about it that I don't love.
I do. A lot of sodas like this have a not so great aftertaste.
just brushed my teeth, though.
I love this aftertaste.
It might have something to do with the toothpaste taste in my mouth still.
It is not as sweet as I expected.
No, it's not. I'm going to give it like a 6.
I'm giving it a 10.
Wow.
They nailed the bazooka flavor.
They did.
And
They delivered on what they are promising.
It's got a really
it smells
interesting.
and tastes like bazooka.
It's got a really interesting aftertaste.
Interesting.
And
is
I
a
love
good way
that
to
it's
put it.
pink. So
It is very pink. Ugh, I'm not going to finish mine.
I'll finish it.
Okay.
Oh, I like that. That is a 10 out of 10. It's like chewing bubblegum without all the hassle.
That's so funny. Okay.
What time? I was going to bring. I brought my.
We're good. Can you see?
Yep. But I brought this. I brought my old. I found my old.
Oh my gosh, look at how tiny
an
it is.
old iPod Touch.
It's adorbs.
And
It's smaller than my phone, and I have an iPhone mini.
it's an old iPod Touch, and it has like a ton of games.
Look how cute that is.
It
I'm
has a ton of
obsessed.
games that don't exist anymore, like
Oh,
Peggle. Like
nice.
none of these, like you can't get these games anymore.
Hold it up so people can see how tiny and adorable and cute
It is tiny and adorable, but it amazes me the battery on here. And this has to be like 15, 20 years old.
Really?
But the battery lasts forever because it's not a phone.
I didn't know they
There's
made
no
something
phone.
that small
Yeah.
that long ago.
There's no phone.
Wow.
So the battery lasts forever because there's no
It's the cutest
external
thing
signal.
I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I love this thing. This
Aside
used to
from
be,
puppies.
This used to be our geocaching thing.
Oh.
But this is going to be my new timer for the podcast, which I, of course, forgot to use today. So I'll be looking over at
That's cool. We're right on schedule.
Are we good?
We're good.
So what are we talking about today?
The Fae.
Buffy. Buffet?
The Fae.
The Fae. Yeah, I've gotten super obsessed with this. To the point where I went out to the woods that I walk in and I left a gift for the Fae.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
What did
because-
you leave them?
So the thing is, they like milk.
Was it super salty?
No.
Just kidding.
They like milk.
Okay.
So all I could find to put it in was this plastic
Did
little...
you have to warm it up?
I didn't.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
This plastic little container like you get ketchup in or mayo when you go to a
oh,
takeout.
yeah.
So I went there with this little thing
Did
of
you litter?
milk and I put it on a log
Okay.
off the trail. And then I went home and I was reading more and it said they don't like plastic stuff in the woods
Well, that
because
would
it
make
doesn't
sense.
decompose. So I was
Right.
like, oh, so now I pissed off.
They
the
probably
Fae.
cursed you because
Yeah, that's
you
maybe that's what
littered.
happened to us when we were driving home.
Ugh. Yeah, but when did you do that?
2 weeks ago.
Oh.
Oh, but I was like, I felt bad about it. And then I went back a week later to leave a crystal because they like crystals too. And I have a ton of crystals at home.
Yeah.
So I went to leave a crystal and I found my plastic container laying on the ground.
Oh, good.
So it was almost like a Fae drank it and threw it on the ground all mad
Yeah.
from where it
Take
was sitting.
this.
So I've been leaving them little gifts. But on the other
Nice.
hand, you don't necessarily want to interact with the Fae.
Right.
Which is interesting. And as you know, I was super salty when I started listening to the...
Nice pun.
It is a nice fun.
The
When I
Haunted
started
Objects
listening to the Haunted
podcast?
Objects
Yeah.
podcast, and then they started talking about the stuff I'm going to talk about, and that just annoys me.
Just very little, though.
Yeah, but I thought they were going to talk more about it. But I hate when we're talking about something and then some other podcast does it first
Yeah.
because I don't want people to think that
I
we're
just
just
feel like we
copying them.
don't, we're not competition. So
Oh, we are.
I would love to think we were up, against Greg and Dana Newkirk, but
No.
They have like 25,000 views within the first day.
Yeah, and their episode was about the space pancakes.
Yes.
We talked about
Which
that a
we
couple
did.
seasons ago
Yeah.
about Wisconsin and the UFO guy that the
Did
aliens...
the Fae come up in that episode?
At the beginning, I think,
Okay.
because they thought it might have been a Fae thing.
No,
that-
did it come up in our episode?
No.
I didn't
No.
think
We've
so.
talked about the Fae with Missing 411 because we're going to maybe talk about that a little today. There's like a very big tie-in between 411, Missing 411 stuff, and the Fae.
There's a Bigfoot connection too.
Yeah, but not as much as I thought.
No,
But should we jump into it?
let's do it.
This comes from the teaandrosemary.com website, which is one that I used a lot because it's actually a really cool website. It says, quote, "Have you ever taken a walk through the woods but can't stop checking behind you? Did you feel like you were being watched or that the woods were speaking to you? If you've ever had an experience like this, then you've probably been around the Fae folk without even knowing it." So the Fae are basically a collective of creatures. You know, like I never really knew a ton about the Fae before I started researching this. And what's interesting to me is that like the myths and the stories about the Fae don't have one single origin because it's taken from so many different sources. It's just like, it's basically a collection of folk beliefs from many different sources. I just always assumed that there was like a specific origin story for them, but there's not.
It's kind of like Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bigfoot. And
Every
there's
culture has a version of, well, not every culture, but a lot of cultures have a version of a Yeti or a Bigfoot or something.
Yeah. And a lot of the sites I looked at had differing opinions on the relationship of the term Fae and the term fairies.
Yeah, I
Because
think people assume it's the same
It's
thing.
not. Apparently the Fae don't like the term fairies and will do something nasty to you
Oh.
if you call them that.
Okay.
Uh,
What's
like
the
when-
difference?
to me, like when you think of fairy, what do you think of? Like when I hear the word
Tinkerbell?
Tinkerbell, exactly. That is what I think of when I hear
Something flitting around,
when I hear the word
cute little outfit.
fairy is Tinkerbell.
Okay.
And no, they're like the Fae folk have such a wide range of different types of creatures, and fairy to them is almost like a slanderous term. You know, so they'll do something nasty.
Almost like a stereotype?
Yes, almost like a
Okay.
stereotype. So
Gotcha.
some of the websites said that the terms Fae or Fae folk and fairy can be used interchangeably, and other sites said no, do not use them
Don't you
interchangeably.
dare.
Don't you dare do that,
Okay.
because then you're going to find stuff missing
Ooh.
and all that good stuff,
Okay.
and they'll bring misfortune to you. So it's said that they prefer the term Fae folk or good folk.
Good folk.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
couple different terms that they like, but I like good folk. I think that's cute.
Mm-hmm.
So the prototypical fairy, like I said, I have in here, like what I picture when I hear Tinkerbell, is believed to be mostly from the Celts. So this comes from the World History Encyclopedia and Encyclopedia Britannica. The ancient Celts were various tribal groups living in parts of Western and Central Europe in the late Bronze Age and through the Iron Age. Given the name Celts by ancient writers, these tribes and their culture migrated, so they established a presence all over the place. I got a sneeze coming, so say something.
It's interesting that the Celts didn't call themselves the Celts.
No, they
Someone
didn't.
else came up with that term.
Yeah.
I wonder how often that has happened in history.
Well, because there's probably so many different variations of groups with
Yeah.
the Celts, you know? Like, the tribes in the Celt groups eventually ranged from the British Isles and northern Spain to as far east as Transylvania, Turkey, and the Black Sea coasts.
Okay.
And that's a lot of...
a big-
That's almost like all of Europe. I
Yeah.
mean, that's huge. So, you have this wide range of people in this area. There's going to be all sorts of different beliefs. They're not all going to necessarily believe the same thing. Although diverse tribes and never a single unified state, the ancient Celts were connected by the Celtic language and marked similarities in art, modes of warfare, religion, and burial practices. Although the Celtic, I don't know if it's Celtic or Celtic.
Celtic.
Yeah. Although the Celtic,
I say that with such authority.
well,
I
like,
assume it's Celtic.
I'm just going to say Celtic too. Celtic people, although the Celtic culture was absorbed within the Roman Empire, Celtic people continue to thrive in more remote parts of Europe, like Ireland and northern Britain, where Celtic languages are still spoken today. They were polytheistic, which means that they believed in more than just one god. And if you look at some of their beliefs, you can kind of see how the Fae fit in. Some of the things they believed in includes the reverence for sacred groves and other natural sites like rivers and springs, the dedication of votive offerings to gods such as food, weapons, precious gems, and animal and human sacrifices, and a belief in the protective power of totems, particularly animals like the stag and the boar. But it's not just the Celts. Other people had beliefs that included creatures that ended up being part of what we consider to be the Fae, including Germans, French, all of Great Britain, Greeks, Romans, Slavic folklore, Slavic folklore, Native American belief, Christian belief, and pagan beliefs. So there's stuff coming in from everywhere. You know, like one theory says that the Fae are actually fallen angels, spirits that are stuck between heaven and hell. And another theory says that the Fae are souls of unbaptized babies, not good enough to go to heaven, but not bad enough to burn for eternity. And the Fae folk might just be a type of guardian spirit called an elemental. Elementals are spirits of nature, the actual consciousness of the land, trees, rivers, mountains, etc.
I don't know if I love or hate that theory about babies.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I just don't like it. It's so that it's just, you know, like the belief that if you're not baptized, you're
I'm
going
not
to
a
go
big
to hell.
fan of that.
You know, like if any of these, I like the last one, that they're just nature spirits. They're spirits of the land. That's basically what they kind of are. Like
That's what I've always thought they were.
Like if you believe Bigfoot to be part of the Fae, Bigfoot is a forest guardian, you know, which makes perfect sense. I don't know why I'm coughing and sneezing and my nose is starting to run.
Maybe you're allergic to bazooka
I
soda.
could very easily be allergic to bazooka soda. So from Wikipedia, the label of, quote, fairy has at times applied only to specific magical creatures with human appearance, magical powers, and a penchant for trickery. At other times, it's been used to describe any magical creature, such as goblins and gnomes. Fairy at times has also been used as an adjective with a meaning equivalent to enchanted or magical. A recurring part of legends about fairies is the need to ward off fairies using protective charms. Common examples of such charms include church bells, four-leaf clovers, and wearing your clothing inside out. And there's a tie-in with Missing 411.
The inside out.
Yeah,
clothing.
which is kind of interesting. Like, that's one of the things that people that believe the Fae are tied in with Missing 411 involves the clothing stuff.
People
like
are
clothes
found
going
with their
missing.
clothes on
People are
inside
found with their
out.
clothes on
Yeah.
inside out, which is 100% a Fae thing. So that's super interesting. I've kind of, reading some of this stuff, I've kind of raised up my belief that a lot of the Missing 411 stuff is explainable, 100%
Yeah, I
explainable.
agree.
But the ones that are very weird that we can't explain, like I'm putting Fae at the top of my list.
But do you think that speaks to something in the forest protecting the missing person from the Fae by putting their clothes on inside out?
Yeah, because some
why
people,
would the Fae do it?
some people believe that we're going to get into it, but there's like two subsections of the Fae, and one of the subsections can't reproduce. So what they do is they get people trapped with them that become the Fae. Like the people turn into the Fae because of the magic in the other world where the Fae exist. So that's what they're doing, is taking these people to become part of the Fae, which is an interesting idea.
Yeah.
You know, and people say that sometimes they do that and they're like, oh, this person's not that hot. And then they return them,
Not that
you know. Well,
the ultimate insult. The
Yeah.
Fae didn't want me.
yeah, the Fae didn't want me. They returned me. And that's why some of these people end up just plopped.
Coming back with their clothes on
coming back with
inside
their
out.
clothes on inside out where it was already searched. You know, so it's just like really interesting. Like, you know, I tried watching that Missing 411, the UFO Connection documentary, but I told you about that the other day. I kept falling asleep.
Yeah, that's not
Like,
a good sign.
if I had to pick a supernatural theory for Missing 411, I'm going with the Fae now, because I really like this idea that it's like if Fae are guardians of certain places of the earth, that a woods guardian will find a way to take you. You know, so it's just
But if they're a guardian, doesn't that suggest they want to protect the forest?
Yeah,
So
and-
why
and-
would they take a small child?
to have that child become part of the Fae.
Part of their Fae?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they obviously hate us because of what we're doing to the planet.
Yeah.
You know,
Can't blame them.
yeah, exactly. Fairies were also sometimes thought to haunt specific locations and to lead travelers astray using will-o'-the-wisps. Before the advent of modern medicine, fairies were often blamed for sickness, particularly tuberculosis and birth deformities. In addition to their folkloric origins, fairies were a common feature of Renaissance literature and Romantic art, and were especially popular in the United Kingdom during the Victorian and Edwardian eras. So this next part all comes from the Tea and Rosemary site. I'm not vouching for the accuracy of it, but it's just fun stuff.
Okay. I just like the name of it,
Yeah.
Tea and Rosemary.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot of magic stuff.
Sure.
Like you should check that out because I think that would be kind of up your alley. So this comes from that site, and again, I'm not vouching for all this, but this is just like some background and stuff, and I think it's really interesting. So from the site, it says, even though you probably picture a fairy as a small angelic being with wings, in reality, the fae folk are composed of many different creatures. There is no one specific type of fairy. The fairies that you hear about the most in the witchcraft or spiritual communities are pixies, elves, and house fairies, also known as brownies. There are many types of fairies, but these are the types of fae folk that most people commonly know about or that come into contact with people.
I didn't know elves were considered.
Yeah,
fae.
and I don't even go into elves on here, but because we're going to have probably a side session about Iceland and their connection, their hardcore belief and connection with elves.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't go into too many of them in here because I wanted to really hit some of the stories, but we're going to do more about this because there was this long list of the different types of fae. So I only touch on a couple of them.
Okay.
And I'm like super obsessed with this. I really went down the fae rabbit hole doing this. These fae folk seem to move with the human population they're attached to. For example, in North America, there are some fae folk. I'm going to have a hard time saying that all the time during this episode, fae folk. There are some fae folk indigenous to the area, such as those associated with the Cherokee Nation, but there are also Scottish fae, Irish fae, Germanic fae, and more who migrated over to America with their people. Most fae folk and fairies...
That's kind of cool to think about.
That they came across with them. Most fae folk and fairies live in the other world, and that's what this site calls the realm that they come from, is the other world. Not much is known about the other world besides the fact that it exists separate from our dimension or plane. Legends say that the other world is rather close to our world, though. It's almost as though we live side by side with the fae, but we're in a slightly different dimension. We are still close enough with them to interact, however. There are said to be portals to the other world all over the earth. A mushroom ring is thought to be one of the types of portals, but many more exist. That's a fairy ring, like a fairy circle. According to a website called craftofwicca.com, fae live in a place that goes by many different names. Some people call it the land of the fae, others call it the inner realm, the other land, or the other world, according to legend and many magical practices. It's easier to visit and get visits from the fae at, quote, between times. These are liminal moments when time is transitioning from one state to another, such as sunrise, dusk, and midnight, to name a few. Equinoxes, solstices, new moon phases, and even Samhain, which we talked about in the Halloween episode, I think, because that's like is that the Festival of the Dead? Samhain. It looks like Samhain. Yeah. When the old pagan year gives away to the new, are all good times to connect with the fae and nature spirits. The fae use glamours to affect what we can and can't see. Typically, they have to hide themselves from us because our worlds are so close. Some fae live in nature, but others live in mines, in the sea, and some even live in cities. There are so many different kinds of fae, their living arrangements are just as vast and varied. Fae can also be seasonal creatures. Some fae are active year-round, while others are specific to a season and then they rest in between the seasons. For example, the Seelie Court, and we're going to talk a little bit more later about the Seelie Court. For example, the Seelie Court tends to be most active in spring and summer, while the Unseelie Court is more active in fall and winter. So you would totally be an Unseelie Court person. We have distinctly human emotions, but these types of feelings aren't always present in the other world. The fae folk don't always understand things like empathy, sadness, or love in the same way that we do. However, this also depends on the individual fae. Many of the fae folk are hedonistic. I mean, they're like cats. They want what they want.
Yeah.
They'll give you love if they want to, but they'll also like lunge out at you and get you with their claws.
Sure. Bite you for absolutely no reason.
They're very hedonistic. The fae folk aren't good or bad. They're just individuals. Every fairy that you meet will act a little bit different, just like humans. And they say that about the jinn, too, that there's good jinn, there's bad jinn. It's just like
They're
people.
also known as tricksters,
Yes,
right?
tricksters. One difference is that fairies have their own rules, ethics, morals, and etiquette. It can be difficult to understand them because they live by a culture that we are not used to. So then, can fairies actually hurt you? The simple answer is yes. Fairies can be unpredictable. They don't act like humans in many ways. If you do something that upsets them, they're more than capable of hurting you. Once you invite fairies into your house, you can't just lock your doors against them. They aren't bound by physical laws like we are, which makes it a bit harder to protect yourself.
How do you invite a fairy into your house?
There's ways to do it. Like, you can get like a house fairy. We're going to talk about brownies a little bit. The Fae folk exist in a realm or dimension that is very close to ours, unlike ghosts or spirits. They have more physical power here than spirits do, and they can cause objects to move quite easily. They are able to touch humans, something that would be incredibly difficult for a spirit to accomplish. Many powerful witches and spiritual teachers who work with the Fae folk have described negative interactions. There are reports of Fae stealing items, causing bad luck for a long time, killing crops, hurting animals, making people sick, temporarily blinding humans, or causing madness or loss of speech. At the very worst, Fae have been known to cause strokes, steal children, or even try to kill humans.
Wow.
Keep in mind that these are like the worst case scenario stories. In all of these instances, the Fae were enacting revenge that they felt was well deserved based on something the human had done, whether the individual realized the indiscretion or not. Typically, Fae only want to harm a human if the person has touched or ruined a fairy place, although this always depends on the fairy in question. There are very loving, forgiving fairies, such as house fairies, and then there are part of the Fae folk who will hurt humans for no reason at all, such as the Unseelie Court. However, fairies can also heal you. They can befriend you, they can make your gardens grow, they can play with your pets, and introduce you to a really magical world. There are some lovely Fae folk out there who enjoy playing with children, working with nature, and interacting with the more beautiful parts of the world. But keep in mind that all of the Fae are often mischievous. That doesn't mean that they're bad, but they typically enjoy playing tricks, or they might steal things from your home, or trick you into giving them something. So I just think that's really fascinating, like their sense of, like, especially their sense of, like, somebody does them wrong.
Yeah.
You know, like, they're very, like I said, cat-like. From a website called thepeculiarbrunette.com, the website says...
That's me.
That totally is you. The website says, when learning about the Fae, you'll often come across the phrases Seelie and Unseelie. Seelie originates from the word Selig, which means blessed. The Seelie refer to a group of lovely, cheerful, friendly, and helpful fairies who are typically willing to help humans and are most likely honorable. Alternatively, the term Unseelie refers to a group of fairies hostile to humankind and wicked in temperament. The Unseelie are thought to enjoy annoying and harming mortals and are easily offended and should be avoided. However, it's worth mentioning that neither is necessarily good or evil, and this is an oversimplification. Remember, all fairies deserve equal respect. The Seelie Court is one of the most well-known aspects of fairy lore. They're thought to be benevolent fairies who act as arbiters and judges in fairy disputes. The Seelie Court is typically seen at twilight when they conduct their courtly processions. They're especially active during the spring and summer months. Most members of the Seelie Court enjoy beautiful things. They're all about the stunning dresses and clothing, harmonious instruments, delicate flowers, and of course, dancing. The Seelie Court is made up of the most beautiful types of fairies. So when you think of pixies, the little humans, that's Seelie. Like they're the Seelie. The Seelie Court types of fairies are known to be friendly to humans. They're said to seek help from humans if needed and return human favors with kindness. However, like any other type of fairy, the Seelie Court has its mischievous ones too. They can easily play tricks on you or get revenge if they feel slighted. Trooping fairies, and I've come across a lot of stories of this. Trooping fairies are typically a part of the Seelie Court and are mostly occupied with their community in peaceful society, including royalty and high society. Trooping fairies are a large group of the Fae that usually travel in groups and are recognized for marching in order, dancing, partying, and throwing exciting festivities and fairs. Like when we did that story about the person that saw like those gnome creatures marching through the woods, and they said something about they were doing this march about 1994, war.
Yeah.
That was a trooping. That was a trooping.
Okay.
That was a group of trooping fairies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And are they all small?
Yeah, most of them are small.
Okay. I'm picturing like little
leprechauns.
mini tents,
Like we're going to talk
and,
about
Ferris
leprechauns
wheels
too. Yeah.
at their fair.
Yeah. But people have
Like a Renaissance fair.
people
but
have
tiny.
described getting lost in the woods and coming across this weird little fair like going on in the woods. Whether it's legitimate or not, I don't know. But there are stories of that. Most of the legends about trooping fairies describe them as fun-loving and always looking for lighthearted entertainment. The Unseelie Court is the darker counterpart to the Seelie Court. The Unseelie court is made up of many different types of fairies, but they're thought to attract lower type of fae, such as bogarts or bogarts.
How's it spelled?
Boggart.
I would say Bogart. Maybe.
Bogart. Yeah, bogarts and bogies. Some legends say that they fight each other, while others say they're simply polar opposites and they just avoid each other. The Unseelie court is thought to be ugly or even hideous and more than a little scary. The court can be made up of dark fairies as well as lost spirits, so they tend to be most active during autumn and winter, especially around Halloween time. Dark magic is often the work of the Unseelie court. They're known to work with witches concerning black magic or to make deals with humans, but these deals never work out well for the human. So think of the genie in a bottle that gives you does your wish, but gives you a bad,
right?
Makes it somehow bad. There's always a consequence. In fact, most humans would do well to stay far away from the Unseelie court. There's virtually no way to get along with them, but there are many ways to make them angry. The term Unseelie translates to unblessed. Even in the fairy world, the Unseelie court is dark, dangerous, and evil. The court travels at night on the winds. Members of the Unseelie court can't reproduce, so they're said to steal humans and force them to join the court in order to keep their numbers up. According to legend, travelers going through woodsy areas at night should be careful and avoid the Unseelie court. So that's one of the people the people that tie the fae in with missing 411 say that's what's happening, is that they're in the woods, and then they use the magic to get the person lost in the woods or to pull them to the other world, and then they're stuck there and end up joining the Unseelie court. So this is all like stuff that
I'd rather be taken captive by the first group.
Oh yeah, the pixies, like
The
cute little
Seelie
pixies,
court,
little pixies flying around, and cute little
Fairs,
cute little brownies, cute little house goblins. So what's a fairy ring? Seeing a ring of mushrooms around a tree in an open space is often considered a sign of the fae. Fae like sitting on top of mushrooms, so they appear to be growing out of them and blend in quickly if anyone walks by. Many legends and fae mythology surround fairy rings, and not all of them are good. Some lore indicates that any person who enters a fairy ring takes on the burden of dancing with the fae until they go insane or die of exertion.
Well, okay then.
A circle of dead grass.
Maybe that explains the dancing plague.
It could. Maybe that was the
covered in the side session.
A circle of dead grass could also count as a fairy ring. Like if you see a circle of dead grass for no reason whatsoever.
Like not where Lucy peed in the backyard?
Not where Lucy peed in the backyard. But if there's just a random one, that could be a fairy ring. However, finding a fairy ring is sometimes seen as good luck. Sitting inside a fairy ring is usually not recommended, but meditating next to one can help build a close connection with the fae. You could also try placing an offering next to one. So working with the fae. The fae often do not trust humans and are right not to, 100%. They know what we've done in the past, but most fae will admit that not all humans are bad. Many fae are pleased with at least a few aspects of human culture. Fae are tough to find, especially if they do not wish to be seen. Before working with the fae, make sure you know how to banish them and protect yourself. Also remember, this process can take a while because you're trying to establish a relationship and a connection.
And trust.
Yeah, and trust. So it's like working with school children, basically.
Yeah.
Fae are misunderstood creatures that are not to be aggravated. They can become violent if provoked or when they feel that humans have been overstepping their bounds. Fae only really care about themselves, but they will take an interest in humans if they believe that there might be something curious about that person. If the fae are keen on conversing with you, they may leave you gifts. They might move things around, appear in dreams, or even show themselves to you during the day. Stay alert and remember to return the favor with offerings. Here are a few ways you can attract the fae and start working with them. Leave an offering. Fae love dancing around a hawthorn bush. Try planting a hawthorn bush in your yard. Do you have a hawthorn bush?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'd have to Google it.
I could see
we have miscellaneous stuff in our yard that
But a lot of the stuff that I looked at involved hawthorn bushes.
Okay.
So that's supposedly like a fae attractor.
Hawthorn bush.
Oh, that is so carbonated.
Yeah. Oh. Now I need my glasses. Sorry. This is riveting. Oh, I just hit my face on the microphone.
If you don't have a hawthorn bush, go get one. I want Lucy to watch the fae dance around in your backyard.
No, I don't. No, we don't have one of those. It's pretty.
But this I could also see you doing. Create a fairy altar in your yard. Keep it very clean and well organized so you don't offend them. Braiding your hair is a form of knot magic that most fae love. Show that you respect nature. Reduce your waste, recycle, and pick up litter.
I always wanted to have like a little fairy garden. Maybe I should do
You
that.
should. Like, you totally should.
You know
Tips.
that the tree stump that's like a big tree. It's not really a stump. I guess it is, but it's like 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
It's the tree that fell on our
Yeah,
house.
the one that fell in
I
your
always
house.
meant to put like a little door on it.
Like a little gnome door.
Yeah.
You should. You totally should.
I thought that'd be cute.
Tips for encountering the Fae. Do not eat their food. Legend
Okay.
says that eating the food of the Fae folk will cause you to become stuck in the fairy world or to go crazy because you will lose taste for all human food. Do not give them your real name. Do not enter a fairy ring. And above all, do not be rude. Relationships, connections, manners, and traditions are fundamental aspects of the Fae. Remember this as you work with them and maintain proper etiquette. Make no attempt to force a Fae to tell you its name. As discussed above, names are incredibly significant to the Fae and contain spiritual energy and power. Some Fae prefer to use a nickname. If this
Reminds
is
me of demon stuff.
yeah, yep. If this is communicated to you, it's polite to continue using their nickname. Also, avoid speaking your name out loud to the Fae since it gives them power over you. It's often believed that the Fae disapprove when you say the words thank you or please.
Yeah.
It gives them the perception that you still owe them something or are willing to do more for them. So choose your words carefully. If you'd like to communicate, say, I appreciate you or you are most kind. Like, do not say thank you or please
Okay.
because that offends them. Most Fae are very shy and private. It's considered rude to pop off and boast about your encounters and interactions with them. Fae believe this to be disrespectful and may stop working with you. So if you work with them and you start telling people you're working with them, they'll stop. Not every interaction will result in a physical manifestation of the Fae, but there are typically signs of your endeavors to connect that say that you're being effective with communicating with them. So notice signs, numerology, and animal symbolism like butterflies. There are many signs that Fae can use to communicate they're close by. The best way to notice is by slowing down and observing nature and animals all around you each day. That way, when the Fae are close, you'll pick up on their signs. Here are a few signs to watch for. If you hear the sound, and there's stories coming up and we're going to talk about some of this. If you hear the sound of quiet laughter or hauntingly beautiful voices singing in the distance. Fae are often believed to be close by when the veil is at its thinnest during Beltane and Samhain. Finding a fairy ring. If you see spheres or flickers of light near plants, flowers, mushrooms, water, or in your peripheral vision. A sudden burst of floral scent with no explanation. Be careful with this one because it can also be an indication of a deceased loved one or ancestor trying to communicate with you. If a single shiny object goes missing and then reappears in an odd place. Have you ever had a pair of earrings where one ended up in a strange location in your home later? It might be the Fae. If you start feeling called to work with the magic elements of fire, water, air, earth, and spirit. If animals around you start acting strangely, or if you see an excessive amount of wild animals that you wouldn't normally see. If you start having more animistic beliefs, or the idea that objects, places, insects, creatures, rocks, everything has feelings and a soul. If new plants, mushrooms, or flowers start to suddenly grow around your home, or if Fae appear to you in dreams. If you've been working on attracting the good folk to your garden or home, how do you know when they're present? Here are some more signs to look for. Again, hearing far-off music, specifically harps and flutes. We're going to talk a lot about flutes in the stories because there's a lot of stories. If your garden is suddenly thriving and flowers are blooming earlier than expected or seem to have burst forth overnight. If a mess has been made of the straw in your garden or barn, that means fairies were there playing in the straw. If you find fairy knots in your hair or in your animal's hair. Does Lucy ever have fairy knots?
No.
No.
She loses chunks of hair, though.
Does she? That's
Yeah.
probably not the Fae.
Yeah.
If you leave offerings for them and find that the next day the offering is gone, bowl is empty, the cup is licked clean, etc. Mine was gone. My milk was gone, but it was also a week.
Squirrels.
And it was probably a squirrel just having a little milk party.
Chipmunks,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
having like a little milk party in the woods. If you find your, I wish they would
They're
do
like,
this.
where are the cookies?
This is where I need Fae. If you find your kitchen or home cleaner than when you left. So I need a house.
Yeah, I'd love that too.
I need a brownie. I need a house Fae to kind of clean. Offerings to the Fae. They enjoy fruit, crystals, baked treats. They enjoy you singing to them. They love milk, dark coffee, dancing along to music, and alcohol. The darker, the better. They also love shiny items, tobacco, and candy. Avoid chocolate and anything that is harmful to the environment. And above all else, avoid iron. Like, iron is bad for the...
Yeah.
Like,
And salt.
and salt. I didn't come across a lot of salt stuff on here. I came across a lot of iron. Like, that's one of the things they say. I think it might even be one of our stories. I don't know if I included that one. But if you have, like, a piece of iron on you, the Fae will stay away from you if you're in the woods.
I guess if you want to avoid them.
Yeah. It's weird. Like, I would like to have some encounters with them, but at the same time, they're super...
I feel like you're opening a can of worms.
Yeah, they're
maybe?
super mischievous. So here are a couple types of Fae. This, again, comes from the Tea and Rosemary website. One type is brownies. And I'm not talking about the little Girl Scouts. I'm talking about brownies.
Baby Girl Scouts.
Brownies are your typical household spirit. They originated in Scottish folklore, although they popped up in English and German folklore at times too. Originally, browners were known as helpers for farmers.
Browners?
Brownies. Did I say browners? Originally, brownies were known as helpers for farmers. Brownies are short, around 3 feet tall, and have pointed ears, ruddy complexions.
Well, they're bigger than I thought they'd be.
Yeah, and have pointed ears, ruddy complexions, and brown working clothes.
It reminds me of Harry Potter.
J.K. Rowling definitely got some inspiration for house elves from brownies. They have a lot in common.
Dobby.
Yeah, it's funny you said that because that was literally my next sentence. Brownies are drawn towards the most deserving families. To them, this means the people who work the hardest and who need extra help. When brownies stick with a family for a while and are generally happy, they will bring good luck to the household. They're kind of a magical magnet for luck. Don't forget to feed your brownie, though, or they will get angry. They love milk, cookies, or honey left out at night. They simply want to feel thought of. Do not present a brownie with an offering of clothing, because this would be seen as a great insult to them, and they would then most likely leave your house forever. Brownies will make friends with your pets and love being in a household with animal friends. Be careful, because brownies can be fickle. If you upset them, you'll find yourself in a bit of trouble. They will either take off, never to be seen again, or will cause problems in your home. But if you treat them well, they can be super loyal to your property or even your family. Some brownies bond really tightly with their families or even one specific member of the family and feel quite an allegiance. Although brownies will sometimes be in between families, they're very social and generally like living around people. These are some of the sweetest types of Fae folk who love being around humans. But if you anger or abuse a brownie, it can then become a bogart. Typically, a bogart is a brownie that was treated badly. This can make the brownie act out, and over time they will turn into a bogart, which means they're now attached to a property for the purpose of causing issues, bringing bad luck, and seeming to haunt the property.
I had a bogart.
You did have a bogart.
He was a sweet boy, though.
He was a very sweet boy. I miss Bogart. He was a big boy.
He was a big boy.
He was a very big boy. What kind of dog was he?
German Shepherd Black Lab.
Yeah, so he was a big dog. Another type, and this is, of course, my favorite, pixies. When you think of the different types of fairies, the image that pops in your head is probably a pixie, even if you don't realize it. Pixies are only about 4 inches tall and tend to live in the gardens and woods. They're the type of fae that has the most contact with humans, so they tend to show up a lot in pop culture, such as fairy tales or Disney movies. Pixies do have wings, but they're known as earth or nature fairies. They're super tiny with human-like figures and delicate wings that move extremely fast, almost like a hummingbird. Some pixies only dress in green, while others prefer other colors of nature like blue or yellow.
Oh, Tinkerbell is like...
Totally a pixie.
Wears green?
Yep. Pixies will choose an area or community to live in, but these communities get torn up quite often to build homes and new housing developments. When this happens, the pixies in the area will be traumatized and go into hiding. However, they may not leave until the area is totally decimated. If you'd like to draw pixies into your yard, create woodsy areas or a pretty garden for them to live in. Pixies. Wow. Pixies.
You just insulted them.
Yeah, I think I just did. Oh boy, things are not looking good for me. Pixies.
And you're in my house. Way to go.
I know. Pixies appreciate both shelter and nature and will always come check out a cute little fairy house. You need to build a little fairy house in your backyard. Even though pixies tend to enjoy contact with humans, they're also very cunning and can delight in leading humans astray. They are your typical mischievous types of fairies. Of course, every pixie will be a little bit different since they all have individual personalities. One of the podcasts I was listening to about this talked about how Tinkerbell isn't really like this necessarily the sweet little, like, she's mischievous. Like Tinkerbell isn't this angelic little thing. Like she's kind of tricky and jealous, and she's very much a pixie. Pixies don't understand human desperation or pain. They play a lot of jokes for fun, but these jokes may not seem funny to people and can cause harm for humans. They're known to steal stuff from your home or take items and hide them somewhere else where you can't find them. However, as long as you treat pixies well and give them gifts that they approve of, they will probably respect you too. This one I love. This is like one of my favorites, and this one is the dryad. Dryads are a type of fairies that are tied to trees. While they aren't the actual spirit of the tree and are a type of fae, if the tree dies, the dryad will die too. Dryads don't typically travel far from their trees. They're very attached to one specific area and will do everything in their power to keep the tree alive. These type of fae will look most favorably upon humans if the humans care for their trees. They can be a little bit shy, but when they see a human taking care of the environment and treating animals and nature well, they're more likely to open up and communicate. You'll be able to tell that you have a dryad in your yard if any of your trees have a face appear on them, like a face. Like I've seen some trees that have like really creepy faces on them. You know, like it just grows into the tree, but it looks like a human face.
Like knots and stuff.
That's a sign of a dryad.
Like
that's a sign of a dryad.
Okay.
Alternatively, if you feel an active, different energy around a specific tree, this indicates that the tree spirit also has a dryad attached. If you want to chat with dryads in your backyard, first show them your spirit through taking care of your trees. After a bit, they will begin to trust you. It's easier to communicate with dryads if you're actually touching the tree and standing on the ground with bare feet, since they communicate through the earth.
Grounding.
And that's another missing 411 thing too, is people's shoes being off for no reason. That they think it's tied in with this belief with the fae and the earth. You know, like tied in with the earth with their bare feet.
There's a whole movement too about grounding.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah, which I 100% believe.
Yeah, I do too.
You know, because you're in direct contact with the earth. Dryads are some of the sweetest types of fae. If you're just dipping your toes into communicating with the fae, I recommend starting with dryads. Like I love, there was one, it was a Reddit years ago where the guy talked about how it literally changed his life when he would go on walks through the woods to hug random trees. So I did that one day in the woods, and all I could think of was like, I hope there's not a trail cam that somebody's watching me wondering why the hell I'm hugging a tree in the middle of the woods.
Literal tree hugger.
Yeah,
I'd be worried about ticks, but that's just me.
Ticks. Yeah, you're super.
I'm so
even the other day, you were so anti-tick.
Well, those cemeteries had long grass.
Tall grass.
Yes.
Yeah. But I love dryads. Like dryads is one. Like dryads and pixies are like the ones I love. Like I love the tree. Like I love trees.
Me too.
You know, so I love the dryads. Another one that a lot of my friends are actually super into are gnomes. Gnomes are well known due to pop culture, but they're actually one of the many types of fairies that live among tree roots in the forest. The myth of gnomes originated in Scotland, but they're thought to inhabit any woodsy area, including many parts of the United States. Gnomes look almost like little dwarves. They mature quickly, so they typically appear old. They wear pointed red hats with green or blue clothing. You'll find gnomes.
They always have a beard too, right?
Yes, they always have a beard. You'll find gnomes in most natural woodsy areas, so their diet depends on exactly where they're living. Gnomes are known to enjoy fruit, nuts, vegetables, eggs, and mushrooms. Gnomes are extremely connected to nature. In fact, they're actually earth elementals, so they're very powerful with anything related to the earth. If you want to work earth magic and befriend a gnome, they can help you to become super powerful. They're known to care for animals and are natural healers, although they tend to use their healing powers for animals and plant life, not necessarily humans. Gnomes are very shy and cautious. They stay far away from humans, especially due to their small size. The next one is changeling. Stories of changelings have been passed down for centuries and involve the Fae leaving deformed or sick fairy infants in place of human babies shortly after the baby is born.
Have you ever seen that?
No, I've never. I know what you're talking
the
about,
movie, The
but I've never
Changeling?
seen it. No. One believes
I don't think it's supposed to be about the Fae.
I don't think it
but
is
it is
either.
about a child that
being
is
replaced. Yeah. Yep. One belief surrounding changelings is that the Fae take human children, leaving a fairy in its place. A changeling could be identified by a few characteristics, including being old, ugly, having minimal growth, or advanced, and being highly advanced and intelligent for its age. Parents and family members were frequently blamed for Fae kidnappings. A newborn that received too much adoration or praise might garner unwanted awareness from the Fae who desired attractive or charming babies. Fear of changeling Fae abductions were prevalent throughout European folklore, but similar beliefs have been found in multiple cultures. And the last one I'm going to kind of look at is leprechauns. Leprechauns are solitary fae and are short, bearded men who wear suits and ties and often make their homes in old churches or castles. These types of fae love music and are talented musicians, often playing a fiddle, a pipe, or a harp. A leprechaun is often described as being dressed entirely in green, although sometimes they wear a red coat, brown pants, and a tall hat. He typically wears a leather apron and seems to be fixing a shoe with his small hammer and pounding away. This tapping sound indicates his proximity, but people should avoid approaching them. It's said that the leprechauns are always mending the shoes of trooping fairies because they're often worn out from so much dancing and traveling. Sometimes called a fairy banker, leprechauns have rights to massive amounts of wealth and gold that he does not part with easily. He guards his wealth zealously, does not keep it near his home, and is often thought to use what to indicate its location?
A rainbow.
A rainbow. Hence the belief that you can follow a rainbow to the pot of gold.
I didn't know they were cobblers.
I didn't know they were cobblers either, but I like the idea that they're cobbling the shoes for the trooping fae that are always marching.
It's like a little society.
Yeah. Although leprechauns are often depicted as humorous, cheerful, and friendly in modern culture, this idea could not be further from the legends. Leprechauns are often cunning, self-centered, vengeful, and they love isolation. They are just as likely to play a nasty trick on an unsuspecting human as they are to provide help or kindness.
1 hour.
Oh, we're doing good. We're doing good. Oh yeah, we're going to be able to get to all the stories. And this is something that you and I talked about. Is Bigfoot a fae? Like, there's people that think it is, and then there's other people that think it is. So I looked on Reddit to see what people said. Somebody said, as a Scottish American, yep, Bigfoot and other cryptids are definitely fae. Somebody replied and said, most land spirits are fairies. Only cursed beings like Wendigo, werewolves, vampires are not. Certain creatures like vampires are definitely not part of the fae. Abrahamic jinn, demons, angels, etc. aren't either. Somebody else responds and says, Bigfoot are totally an American fae. They are attached to the land the same as everywhere else. Somebody else responds, I definitely think the Bigfoot are fae beings. There seems to be a spectrum of good and evil with them, and they often have a trickster element to them. They seem to be very connected to the land, especially trees and water. Floating, glowing orbs of light are often associated with Sasquatch creatures. I don't know if I knew that. Is that true?
Something else that I was watching, I think I sent the video to you, where they were talking about fae, and one of the things they talk about is if you see an arched structure in the woods, do not walk through it.
We got that coming up in the stories too.
Because Bigfoot structures are a thing.
Really?
And so when I
because
a lot tree structure.
A lot of the stories I saw where people, there's a couple that we're going to get to today, but a lot of the stories I see where people get drawn to the woods say that a path appears that they've never seen before, and there's always arch
leading them
there's
to
always
something
it's
they
like
want.
A tree, like arch of trees lead down it. So that's
and
interesting.
I saw that and I was like, that's a Bigfoot structure. So it was an interesting crossover.
That is an interesting crossover. And I didn't know about floating orbs of light being associated with Bigfoot. And that's a common thing?
Yeah. Whistling, knocks, and tree structures.
Somebody else replies and said, there are fae in all parts of the world. Am I wrong? People have seen gnome and leprechauns in America. What would they be considered? So why couldn't Bigfoot be the fae too? Somebody else writes that Bigfoot are definitely American-like fae beings. In the U.S., especially in the eastern parts like the Appalachians or the Ozarks. These places are deep, and the Appalachian Mountains in particular are the same range as the Scottish Highlands before the continents split. I don't know if is that true?
I don't know.
So it's not far off.
Interesting,
It's
though.
not far off to surmise that some of the other people like the Fae also came along. Also,
That's the first I've ever heard that.
Same, but I guess it makes sense that it's part of the same mountain range, but they just drifted
Isn't
apart.
that the Blue Ridge Mountains?
Yeah. Also, most Americans are confused about this stuff. It's hard to find accurate information wading through all the BS. I'm not sure if the internet helps or hinders. So what do you think?
Well, also, we don't have thousands of years of this kind of folklore.
Exactly. So that's what I got for like the
Very
research
interesting.
part. The rest is all
Stories.
So what do you think?
I'm
of
excited
the
to
Fae?
hear the stories.
What do you think of the Fae?
I'm on the fence.
Do you think
I don't
do you
know.
think I flip flop between Bigfoot?
Oh,
like
Bigfoot?
I could see Bigfoot being a type of woodland.
I am always on the side of Bigfoot is flesh and blood. It's just an evolved
I'm always on the
hominoid,
side that
bipedal
Bigfoot is the
primate.
same. Bigfoot is the same as the Fae, which are the same as the aliens, which are the same as all this stuff. That it's a dimension close to ours that they're able to come back and forth. That's the only thing that makes sense for me with Bigfoot. Like, why have they never been found? You know, why are no bodies ever found? I think that they have an ability to go from one dimension to the other. And I think that's where the Fae are. I think there's this whole dimension close to us that has all these fantastical beings in it that waltz over every now and then waltz back. That's the only
I
thing that
think
makes
it's
sense to me.
possible, but I also think you don't find a lot of animal carcasses in the woods.
Yeah, but you find bones. You find. How come nobody's found?
But I think they're intelligent. They probably bury their dead. If they're intelligent enough to communicate through vocalizations
and wood knocking.
and whistling, I think they're intelligent enough to bury their dead.
I'm going to disagree with you on this.
And also, again, I go back to this. I don't remember if it was a gorilla or what kind of primate it was that was thought to have been extinct just a few years ago, was found thriving in an area.
True.
It was supposed to be extinct.
True.
So I just think it's so possible for something with intelligence to elude being
I still think it's some
captured.
kind of transdimensional being. So we're going to disagree
Yeah.
on that.
That's fine. A lot of people think that. Is it possible? Sure. Logically, I think it's a flesh and blood thing.
But I just think if it was a flesh and blood thing that was always here, we would have found some.
I don't think there are as many as people think
We
there
need to
are.
do another episode about Bigfoot because especially
We've only
with
done one.
like the Gimlin Patterson film is like a
Yeah.
hot topic right now because people have stabilized it.
Yeah,
and
that's really
And
cool to
I
watch.
looked at it like the Bigfoot Reddit and people were talking about that, and a lot of people are like, dude, I was convinced for my whole life that it was a costume, and they said I don't think it's a costume
Right.
because of the way the muscles move and stuff, and that it does have breasts, so it's a female, and they're like, I don't think it's a costume anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of people think now that that's a legitimate Bigfoot video. So we need to talk more about that. But now we're going to dip into some Reddit stories. I have basically, I think, 3 different sections. I think we're going to find out. But this first section I titled Fairy Led because there's something called being pixie led or being fairy led, which is when you're drawn to the woods and you are gone.
And
you know, that they have a way of like luring you to the woods.
And what I was seeing and reading was that it's always something you want.
Yeah.
You can see it in the distance.
Yeah.
It's something you want or need, and
Yeah.
that's how they pull you in.
And you can't get to it and you don't get to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Or
So-
you cross through that archway you're not supposed to walk through.
So the first section I have titled Fairy Led. So Krista's going to do the first story, I think.
Okay. From Reddit. I went for a walk with my mother on a local path around a fairly large hill, a regular pastime of ours. We walked the 2 miles from the car to the hill before beginning our ascent to reach the loop, which is only about half a mile encircling the peak. So we've been walking for I don't know how long when I noticed something odd. The sun was in the same place to us as it had been for however long we'd been walking, on a circular path. It should have appeared to move as we changed direction. We should also have been reaching the point where you headed down the hill, but our path was completely level. I was taught to use the sun and other natural signs to navigate as I spend a lot of time just wandering, whether on horseback or on foot. I realized that I had no recollection of that part. It's like our drive home the other day.
It's like our drive home the other.
realized-
Seriously, I mean that's
Yeah.
that was the first thing I thought about when that kind of happened to us.
I realized that I had no recollection of that part of the path, and had been walking along in silence for...
That was us.
Yes.
That was 100%.
Well,
so
here's-
maybe I pissed him off by putting
in
that
the
plastic
cemetery
thing in
or
the
something?
maybe,
Or maybe we did something that day in
Maybe
the
we did something
cemetery.
that day. We were nice to the baby deer.
thought, yeah.
You know, we weren't mean.
I realized I had no recollection of that part of the path and had been walking along in silence for, well, here's the weird bit. Out came my phone and it showed me the time, 14:37, which is 2:37 p.m. I had absolutely no signal, even though it's usually spot on up there. We had set off at 11 in the morning and all the hairs on my body stood up. This was a short walk, an hour and a half at most from leaving the car to getting back to it. The sun should have been above us, but it was at where I would have said 3 o'clock for that time of year. I remember the time because when I turned to ask my mum, so this must be someone
It
from
is
the
like
UK,
I love mum. I love when they say mum.
what time she had. She looked straight through me like I wasn't there and oh my gosh, she looked straight through me like I wasn't there and remained like that for a whole 3 minutes. She was just staring off into the space where I had been to her left.
That's creepy.
At 14:40, she suddenly came to life. I had moved away, too nervous to remain under her gaze like that after about a minute of saying "Mum" and nudging her rigid shoulder in a building childlike panic. I was 20. I was sitting on a log just off the path, getting pretty bloody freaked out. Mom glanced around and said in a hollow, weird voice, quote, "I think the fairies might have us. We need to keep walking." Okay. I scrambled up and fell into line with her determined stride on this unfamiliar path. I wasn't raised to see them as little cutesy people with wings, you see. To me, they're straight out of nightmares because my mother's upbringing said that's what they are. Creatures out to confuse and trick. My mom always wears a battery-operated analog watch, and she lifted her wrist. I asked her what time it was. 2:45. She put, at least their times matched. She put her wrist down and lifted it again to check. That's not right, is it? I just shook my head. All right, keep walking. So we did. We trudged on through this unfamiliar woodland for what I would have said felt like at most half an hour. Wow, I can't read today. It never turned a corner or changed elevation. I knew we were in trouble when my stalwart, never frightened of anything mother began to get nervous. So in response to her nerves, she becomes pissed off. She steeled herself and spoke as she would to a lurking person. She yelled, "Who's toying with us? Put us back." Then there was what I can only describe as a burst of deep laughter from the path behind us.
That's so creepy.
I just got the chills from that. And we spun around to face it. We were now at the top of the hill that led to the gate out of there. It's at the fork where you can go left or right, neither of which I remember choosing, even though we always make a discussion of it. We made our way down the slope and out of the woods as calmly as possible and got back to the car, which is parked next to an ancient church and cemetery. The time in the car, 17:12. 5:12 p.m. We lost nearly 5 hours.
You know what this also sounds a lot like too, though, is alien abduction, like missing the missing time. Yeah.
I've had a lot of creepy things happen to me, but this is about one of the worst. I wasn't alone. It was the middle of the day on a usually familiar path. Where did those hours go? Where was that path? So many unanswerable questions. I even went up there alone once to see if I could experience again, but nothing happened. Why would you want to do that again by yourself?
But that's
really
this
creepy.
Is basically being pixie led or fairy led, where stuff like you're lost, you're not where you were.
Yeah.
And then you tell them to put
Reminds
you back.
Me of Blair Witch a little bit.
You yelled at them to put you back, and then you heard laughing.
Ooh, Blair Witch. I never thought of that as a fae thing.
It could easily be a fae thing.
Getting lost in the woods. Weird, the things being left outside their tent.
And always like being lost.
Yeah.
So that's very much
passing
much a fae
thing
thing.
Over and over again, losing time.
Yep.
Weird.
So here's another story from Reddit under the same being fairy led. From Reddit. Before I started senior year of college, I went to visit my bestie, but they have Beastie. I think it's Bestie.
Yeah.
I went to visit,
never know.
or Beastie Boys?
Maybe.
Ad Rock?
We'll go with it.
I went to visit my bestie in Scotland. She took me to visit her aunt in the Highlands. She lived across the street from an old cemetery. I would love that.
Why is there always a cemetery
I don't know,
involved?
but I would love to see, like Scotland, that would sound so
yeah.
beautiful. My aunt wanted us to visit a local hike that ended at something called the Giant's Chair or Giant's Throne. The hike was nice and easy, so it was basically Helen, her friend, and me. My aunt stayed in the car at the beginning of the trail. It was a short walk, like a mile or two. At some point, the other two girls got up ahead of me. That's all I remember. This next part was told to me. Apparently, they turned around and I was just gone. They ended up getting their aunt and searching for me. Local police told them that I had probably gone off to a party and to wait for a bit. So they spent the whole night searching for me. They called my folks, who looked into getting a flight to come find me. My folks were in the States. This is all of a sudden when I started remembering again. I woke up in a field or meadow and went to the closest house and called my friend. I was quite a few miles away from my starting point. I ended up going to the ER and explaining what happened. My friend and her aunt came back with me, of course. The ER checked me and saw no sexual trauma, but they took a rape kit anyway. This happened years ago. The kit eventually came back negative. Anyhow, local police decided that I had a seizure or that I took drugs and wasn't telling everybody. I have seizures, but I don't take drugs. It didn't feel like a seizure, though. Also, after a seizure, I usually lay down and sleep because seizures are exhausting. So I have no idea why I would have walked so far or how I instantly disappeared off the trail. My friend's aunt claims that I was taken by the Fae. She has strong faith in them and gave us all iron nails that she made herself while we were there. When I was found, I had my clothes and I had that nail in my pocket. She claims to this day that nail saved me from staying with the Fae. The only reason I do not believe is because I do have seizures, but I also wonder why I have no memories of what happened during this time frame. So years later, I tried to get myself hypnotized to see what happened. The guy was able to do it. He claims he got me to talk about several things. But when he tried to get me to talk about this instance, They said that I became upset and said something along the lines of, quote, I can't. They'll know and they'll try to get me again.
Ooh.
My mom was there and claims this is what I said. I never tried to bring back those memories since then.
Yikes.
So that's creepy.
That is creepy. Do all these stories take place overseas?
No, there's
some from
a
the
lot of
US?
stories. We got a lot of stories coming up.
Okay.
Especially
I'm gonna wear my glasses.
especially the last section, which is all creature like encounters.
Okay.
So these are just like the being fairy led, and this is like that's missing 411. You know that you're in the woods, then all of a sudden you're gone.
not
But
there.
this one is interesting because this is from the point of the view of the person that.
Not the people around them.
No, this is the
Yeah.
person that disappeared.
Yeah.
So you're next.
All right. Way back in 2004, I was living with a friend in England.
There are like a lot of them take place in
Yeah.
England. So, but England and and Great Britain is very steeped in fae
Folklore.
lore.
Yeah. We used to go walking in the countryside, out in the fields and all that. One time we were out walking. We spied a mini forest type thing towards the edge of a field. Curious, we went over to it. As we approached, we noticed a little pathway / gap in the trees, so we followed it. As we went along through the trees, the pathway became like an archway,
There's the archway.
as if the trees were growing into the perfect shape over the path. This went on for ages, maybe half an hour. Wow. Eventually, we saw daylight at the end, so we powered on along and made it out of the exit into open air. Outside looked normal, countryside, with the exception of a strange settlement before us. It looked like the buildings were made out of junk. Well, wooden junk. There were tiny people, 4 foot, maybe 5 foot max, everywhere wearing rags. They were all muddy and
it's weird because I
unkempt.
can picture this in my head.
I can
You know,
too.
I can 100%
Yeah.
picture what that looks like in my head.
They stared at my friend and I like we were aliens from another world. There wasn't a road, just a muddy path through the center of the buildings. No power lines, nothing modern. While standing there, I suddenly had this feeling that I had to leave. I said to my friend that we had better go, so we went back the way we came. It was a pity this happened in 2004 since we didn't have the tech to hand easily that you'd have nowadays to take photos and videos of everything. Anyway, we went back and discussed it a few times in the intervening months. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore and convinced my friend we had to go back with a digital camera. When we returned, we found the trees in the entrance, but when we followed the path, it lasted a few minutes and emerged into another field, a normal field. We walked the perimeter of the trees, turned out to be just a little square of undeveloped, unused land in the middle of 4 fields. No archway, no village. Suffice it to say, there was no point taking photos. I'm convinced to this day that if we hadn't left when we did, we'd still be there, wherever or whenever there is, to this day, another missing persons report.
Yeah, that's weird that they stumbled upon this,
Yeah.
like almost a fae community.
Yeah. But
So-
then it wasn't there next time.
Yep.
It's like it's only there if they want you to see that
Yeah,
it's there.
yeah. Or you accidentally, because it sounded like the people there were surprised to see them. Like,
Yeah.
like you generally
Well, that's
can't
true.
find it unless they like draw you to it.
But like the archway they walked through
Yeah.
lasted like a half
Yeah.
hour or something.
Yeah.
So it was like a
Yep.
dimensional thing
Yep.
almost.
Yep. So also from Reddit, when I was about 8 years old, my parents divorced. The day we were packing up the house to move across the country, I found my sister outside in the backyard staring at the woods. We had train tracks basically right in our backyard with some woods just behind it. Incidentally, a man had committed suicide on those tracks right behind our house a few years prior. Anyways, this was like 30-something years ago, so the details are a bit hazy. I remember my sister saying that there's a strange opening in the woods and she felt like it was calling for her to enter. I thought she was just pulling a prank like she always did, but she seemed weirdly sincere. Then I looked where she was looking, and then I could see it too. At one section of the woods, the trees made an archway gap, and I remember it having like a weird hazy glow about it. Nothing really noticeable, it just seemed different somehow. Like instead of just regular shadow, it seemed almost purple, I guess. We both just kind of sat there and stared with wonder for a while before we got called inside to do something. Later in the day, I went back outside and tried as hard as I could. I could never find that exact spot again. Now everything just looked like regular woods. And somebody replies to this and says, one time when I was young, somewhere between 6 and 8 years old, we lived on a 7-acre plot of land, only which 2 were not a forest. I used to spend hours exploring these woods and had many, quote, secret bases around it. Now we were closer to the front of the property and had close neighbors on both sides. To the right of our property was a large open field with a hill, and on the other side was a newly sold plot where they were clearing an area to build a home. Now that left side is where the majority of the woods were located. And I remember seeing the marked trees that were the edge of the property only about 2 yards into the woods, and it went a bit of a stretch back. Now, one day I went towards one of my hidden camps and noticed an opening in the trees I hadn't explored yet, so I decided to go exploring. Now, I should have reached the line of trees that was our property edge, but it for some reason just kept going deeper and deeper into the woods. Eventually, I came to a huge clearing with a natural pond and a giant willow tree hanging over it, reeds and cattails in most of the pond, with long grass in the pond, like it had been flooded. Now, the area I lived in never flooded, ever, nor do we have natural willows or springs. I remember that I was worried about getting lost, so I made sure not to go too far into the clearing, and then I turned and headed back the way I came. The weird thing is, when I came back, it was a way shorter trip to get back than it was to get out there, and I never found that clearing again. Even weirder is that a few days later, we drove past that plot of land, and the area I should have explored through the woods to get to the willow pond had long since been cleared out. It's exciting and strange to me knowing that others have gone through the same thing. So that's like the section about being pixie-led and fairy-led, and just these paths and these things in the woods that should not be there that people stumble across.
Yeah.
And like if you come across this, like if this guy went farther out and never was able to get back, is that a missing 411 case that
Right.
the person just disappears?
Yeah.
So it's weird. Like there's so many stories about this. I think I might even have more coming up if we have time, but there's just tons of stories, and it shows up a lot in the woods stories that we talked about, where people see a trail and then all of a sudden the trail's not there anymore. So there you go. The second section I want to talk about is music in the woods, and this is very much a faith thing, and there's so many stories about this.
If I heard a flute in the woods,
Yeah,
I think I'd be a little creeped out by that.
I would totally be creeped out by that.
Especially at night.
Yeah.
It would make me think of
But
leaving
it
DC
happens.
again.
It does make me think of leaving DC, but it happens a lot. Like people hear this stuff in the woods. So you can do the first story. Yep. From Reddit, of course.
I live deep in the mountains, and my hollow is surrounded by woods. There's a little spot you can walk to in the woods, which is just a giant circle with trees open all around it. Me and my friend went to have a picnic there that day and started hearing this flute really loud coming from the direction where no house is there. Sounded like a woodwind of some sort, very spiritual sounding. Mind you, all my neighbors were old, and I can guarantee none of them spent their time walking deep in the woods to play the flute.
It's probably a safe guess.
I mean, I feel like nobody does that.
No.
We heard this for hours. We left about 8 that night, and when we walked back, you could hear it somewhat across the valley.
That's so creepy to me.
It is really creepy. I didn't hear it again for a good 2 years after, but one night I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound coming from right outside my window.
That's definitely creepy.
And I was too worried to look out to see what it was. It went on for about an hour before it stopped playing, and I never heard it again. It's like whatever it was followed him back.
Yeah, and was like outside his window.
Yeah. When we first moved into this neighborhood, somebody, I'm assuming a kid, would walk around the neighborhood playing a trombone, but like just a really long, drawn out note. It was the weirdest thing. I actually forgot about that.
I feel like if I was in the woods and heard a flute, I would be creeped out. If I was in the woods and heard a trombone,
I'd be like,
it would just be
"What?
like kind of
It'd be
funny.
hilarious,
Yeah, it would be
'cause
hilarious.
trombones are funny.
Trombones are funny. Flutes are not funny.
No.
I guess if there's one takeaway from this episode, it's that.
Yeah.
Trombones, funny. Flutes, not funny. This next one actually comes from the subreddit Let's Not Meet. Would you ever read that? Do you ever go on Let's Not Meet?
I've heard about it. I have not. I don't spend much time on Reddit.
You should. Like, Reddit's amazing. Like, I love Reddit.
Anytime anything happens, Jeff goes on Reddit to find out what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Like in our
Like when
our
Trump
town.
got shot.
Oh, sure.
Like I
can't
was at
imagine.
Miranda's house dog sitting, and I was looking at my Google News feed, and there was one thing that kind of mentioned it, and nothing else did. I refreshed, nothing, and then I went to Reddit, and that's all that was on Reddit. So when something
Crazy.
happens, you're almost better off going on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
But the Let's Not Meet subreddit is creepy, but that's more real people, like
I
weird
feel like we've
stalkerish
talked about
people.
it
Yeah.
before. Okay.
Yeah. So this doesn't even come from a paranormal subreddit. This is from Let's Not Meet. This person writes, "So this happened years ago, but I remembered it and thought you guys might find it kind of interesting. A little background, I'm a 17-year-old girl. My family, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., all share this cottage in a nearby campground. We've had it in the family since my mom was a teen, so since I was little, I've been going out there. Since we've been going out there for so long, we know the community fairly well. A lot of strong bonds have been formed with the neighbors and nearby campers. Basically, everybody knows everybody. This one particular incident, my friend and I, who were about 10 at the time, were out for a walk. We only ever hung out when we were at the lake, so we often went hiking along the same trail to kill time, which passed by a forest in the heart of the community. As we strolled along the path, we heard a light tune coming from the forest to our left. Our heads snapped in the direction of the sound, and then the sound came to a stop. We shrugged it off as we were 10, and we didn't get freaked out too easily. We continued walking on the path as the path turned, and our backs were now to where the sound was initially heard. Once again, the light tune started up, and once again, we turned towards the sound. Again, it came to a halt. That's weird. Like it's watching you, and
It's
it
like
stops
a game
playing.
of red light, green light.
Now, I don't know why we continued walking away at this point, but we did. The forest was now a ways behind us when it started up again. This time I turned towards a mysterious song and started walking towards it. The flute didn't stop playing this time, but instead got faster. That's so creepy. I slowed my steps and realized the speed of the song, and then it stopped once again. The second we started walking away, the flutist bounced back into action, and I started running towards the tree line. The song ended when I was just a few meters away, and the silence that followed was deafening. The girl I was with took off running towards the main road, and I followed. Now, it could have been nothing, but for some reason, we didn't tell anybody about what happened. Nothing like that ever happened again, but it freaks me out to this day thinking about it. Someone we knew was maybe messing with us that day. A person in our small, tight-knit community was sitting right behind the tree line watching us. Why? Who knows? I guess we'll never know what would have happened if we crossed the tree line that day. So, random flute player in the woods, let's not meet. And then somebody replies that says, creepy story. The same thing happened to me in Ensenada, Mexico. I was walking on the outskirts of town and I heard it. I tried to follow it, but when I got really close, the flute stopped. It was clear they didn't want me to find them, and they started playing again right as I left. I was about 18, and it really struck me at the time to know that a person was sitting somewhere
That's
and
creepy.
watching me.
Even if it is a person, that's creepy.
And somebody else replies to that and says, weird. I had an experience like this in a graveyard when I was young. My mom and I were exploring it. It's made of 2 giant hills covered in headstones, and trees surround the grounds. All of a sudden, we heard flute music coming from the forest behind the hills. We walked towards the sound, but couldn't see any source through the trees. We decided there must have been a house back in those woods, and whoever lived there was outside playing the flute. I didn't think much about it until a time in my teen years when I hiked back through those same woods with a couple of friends. There's absolutely nothing back there but a swamp in all directions. Yeah.
Creepy.
That is super creepy.
I think I was supposed to read that story, but that's
Oh,
okay.
you were. You were. Shoot.
Because
Okay.
I had it on my screen.
Okay. Sorry.
That's funny.
Sorry to
Keep
steal your
reading.
story.
Just keep reading.
Dang it.
I
Okay.
don't mind. I'm stumbling all over the place today.
I stumble all over the place every episode. So it's nothing unusual. So 2 more of those music and stuff in the woods, and that creeps me out so much.
Yeah, for
It
some
creeps me
reason,
out that
'cause
like
it's just
it's
out of
almost like the person that
place.
was playing the flute and that one was mocking them. Like if they would start to walk faster,
Yeah.
the flute would play faster,
Yeah.
and then it would. So,
Which could be kind of funny,
but
actually.
a lot of people also attribute this to Native American spirits.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of some of the stuff I read said a lot of times with the flute, you'll hear like a drum sound, which means it's Native American. But if you just
Okay.
hear a flute, it's maybe just the Fae.
Okay.
So 2 more
I've
stories.
never heard either while I was in the woods.
I don't want to really be
No,
honest with
not
you.
really. No.
From Reddit. I've been getting more used to camping as a solo female. I'm pretty comfortable in the woods for the most part. I feel safe and at home. This was my first time solo camping in the area I'm from, so it felt particularly special. It's a pretty rugged, remote part of WNC, camped off a gravel road. I don't know what that is. Part of WNC camped off a gravel road right by the creek. After having dinner by the fire, I settle into my tent, the air of early spring growing colder. As I'm trying to get cozy and drift off, I hear what I can only describe as a woman singing. I'm a skeptic, and I know our ears can play tricks on us. I've definitely heard things before when there's a monotonous sound like the river or a fan, so I tried to brush it off, but it had range. It wasn't consistent, and there was definitely a tune to it. At this point, I froze, holding my breath. The singing would stop and then start up again. I was terrified, honestly. Eventually, I had to suck it up and go pee. The moon was full, so I could see nothing at all, just a beautiful creek in the night. I continued to hear the singing for a little while longer before very poor sleep. That's my story. Nothing crazy, but I know what I heard, and I don't have an explanation.
I think what they're talking about, I think they just call it like open camping here.
Yeah.
It's public land where you can just camp
Yeah.
anywhere. It's not a campground. Maybe that's what they're talking about.
But anytime there's singing in the woods or music flute music in the woods. It's creepy to me. And people say this is the Fae trying to attract you, and other people say it's mimics trying to attract you. And then there was a whole fight on Reddit about whether mimics are actually the Fae. So, like I said, a Reddit argument about it.
Sure. Because somebody knows for sure.
This is all kind of tied in together, you know. Another Reddit story. Sorry if this isn't the right place for me, but it seems like it's the perfect place. This happened a few years ago. Me and a friend were using some public Wi-Fi outside of a building doing nothing notable. All of a sudden, I could hear rock music coming from the distance, deep in the fields we were looking over, perhaps hidden by the trees or something. At first, my friend couldn't hear it, but as the noise grew louder, he eventually did. We both thought nothing of it until it got louder. At that point, we decided to look for it in the hopes that it was a party or something. We began making our way down a path leading in the direction of the noise. Dense bushes enclosed the path on either side. We must have been walking for less than 2 minutes before we realized the rock music was coming directly from the bush on our left. At first, we were confused because it was so dense that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for anybody to get there, let alone a party. We were facing the bush, looking in, trying to see what the source of the music was. It somehow seemed the same exact volume as before. This was until it started coming closer towards us, getting louder, which initially freaked us out a bit. But what was more horrible and why it was so unsettling was how it was now literally right in front of our faces, just music with no source whatsoever. The longer we stayed to investigate it, the creepier it became. Naturally, we sprinted off. One thing that stands out the most of both of us is how the sound approached us. The sound itself seemed intelligent. And somebody else replied, said, I heard the most beautiful singing coming from bushes in an area of an open space surrounded by a city in California when I was younger. I spent lots of time constructing and maintaining some cool hangout spots for my friends and I. I was walking the quarter mile down the hill one evening after dusk, and I heard the most beautiful woman's voice singing up from a trail. There was nobody there. I thought it was odd and just kept walking.
I will say that sound can just travel weirdly,
especially in the woods. So
Yeah.
100%. But there are so many stories of people hearing singing, people hearing music, church bells. You know, people hear church bells in the woods when there's nothing there. People hear calliope music, which would freak me out like crazy if I heard that in the middle of the woods.
That's not something you just hear.
No. So everybody says this is the Fae.
The house on the rock.
If you go to the house on the rock, yeah. So this is the Fae. Either letting people hear them or trying to lead them somewhere. So next we get to our creature section.
So is this me or is it
you?
Know me? Okay.
This is the section where it's all encounters with
actual beings. Not just sounds?
Nope.
Okay. When I was about 15 years old and sober, late one night, I love that they had to specify that they were also
so many
sober.
of these start with, I was sober and not on drugs.
Late one, especially at 15. I don't know. I didn't start drinking alcohol until I was older than that, but that's just me.
No, the same for me.
Late one night, I went with a group of about 7 people to this supposedly haunted woods in our area called Okefenokee. Is this in Michigan?
I don't know.
There are various stories about these woods. The main ones being that 7 corpses had been found in the woods and were never identified. Totally factual. Parts of the woods were used as Indian burial grounds or battlegrounds in the past. Possibly true. A lot of stuff in parentheses here. And that a little girl named Stephanie, who was sacrificed by some cult in the 1800s, haunts the woods, and you can sometimes hear her scream. Doubtful.
I'm not buying the Stephanie story.
The douche of the group swore,
every group's got to have a douche.
swore he knew the trails of the woods like the back of his hand, which turned out he didn't. We got lost for about 3 hours wandering these woods until we wound up exiting on the opposite side. These woods are dense and dark as heck, and we already said pissed, so I guess I could say hell.
You could say hell.
And being the geniuses we were, only one flashlight was brought along for the whole group to, quote, share, which was conveniently in our tour guide's hand at the front of the line the whole time, leaving the rest of us to follow behind in darkness. I was at the back of the line, right behind my girlfriend at the time because she didn't want to be last.
Understandable. That's a missing 411 thing too.
After about an hour into wandering these trails aimlessly, I saw what I figured to be a fresh yellow glow stick on the ground about 10 feet off to the side of the trail. Didn't think anything of it, really. You didn't think anything of that?
I would think it's suspicious.
Very. A few minutes later, I see another, but up in the tree in a different color. Then another and another way high up in the trees in just odd places. They gradually started increasing in number and variety of colors to the point that they were everywhere. That's in all caps. And I finally realized that these were not glow sticks when some were seeming suspended in midair. At first, they were only stationary, and then some were literally flying through the air, weaving through the trees, slow
I would
and
kind of
fast.
like to see this. I mean,
This
this
does
sounds,
sound kind of cool.
yeah.
I'm trying to think, were they like long, like straight little things?
I don't
like
know.
Glow sticks?
I don't know.
Or is that just where their mind
I
went?
think that's just where their mind went. I think it's just lights.
At the first sight of these, I began to wonder if the darkness was beginning to make me hallucinate. I asked, am I the only one seeing this? To which my girlfriend replied, no, but let's please not talk about it. Everyone seemed very tense and intimidated, but I followed at the back of the group in disbelief, just observing and admiring whatever the heck it was that we were seeing. Oh, these baseball-ish sized orbs had energy that I felt like personalities. Some felt bright and joyful and sometimes seemed like they were dancing. Others seemed shy and timid and tended to be dim and slow. One in particular was dark and stationary, like a black/purple color that really blew my mind, as if being surrounded by flying balls of light in the middle of the woods isn't mind-blowing enough. Because it's pitch black out, but I was looking at a dark light and it felt ominous. I didn't feel comfortable walking past that one, but regardless, they were beautiful. They were around for no longer than half an hour and gradually disappeared in the same way they appeared. Shortly before, we stumbled out of the woods and right into some guy's property in the middle of the night. Freaked out, we rang his doorbell. He was kind enough to tell us where we were and called the sheriff to give our friend a ride back to his van so he could come back and get us. No idea what it was that we saw. I obviously did a ton of searches on the internet and never found any reports similar to what we experienced anywhere. I've been back numerous times in hopes of seeing them again and never have. It's something I'll never forget and unfortunately have learned that I will rarely be able to share with anyone without being looked at like I'm insane.
There were a lot of comments on that one with people saying, dude, that was like totally the Fae. That was probably pixies.
What's cool is that he was with a whole group of people that
Yeah.
saw them.
Yeah. So, like, I love stories like this. Like, what was that?
Yeah.
Was it? But a lot of people said that sounds like the Fae. That sounds exactly like you stumbled across a bunch of pixies that for some reason let you see them.
Still
Another
me?
story. Yep.
Back in college, there was this tree I walked by every morning when I had to get to my 7 a.m. class. Whenever I passed by, I felt watched, but not in a creepy way, It felt like someone saying, hello there. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I stopped there and greeted my friend. Around mid-semester, a friend asked me if I had ever felt strange by the very same tree. I never told her anything. So we started to sit next to the tree more often during the day. I don't know what it was, but I know in my heart it was Fae related. Reply, the scariest part of this story is the phrase 7 a.m. class.
Yes, that is.
That's cute.
Like, I love that there was like a dryad in that tree. Like, that was a spirit. Like, they liked it, and it was like I love that they sat by it, when they would take breaks. So more Reddit stories. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I used to go watch my brother play soccer. Truthfully, the games didn't keep me very interested, so I would routinely explore areas around the different fields looking for bugs while my grandpa would watch the game with the other parents. During one game, my brother played in a field that was surrounded by a wooded area. I walked around the perimeter of the woods, exploring and looking for critters like I always did. As I walked along, an animal came up to me from out of the woods. I was astounded when I realized that it wasn't an animal, it was actually a little man. Even though it was humanoid in appearance, I knew it wasn't human. I was very short at the time, at most 4 feet, and the creature that I saw was extremely small to me, so it couldn't have been more than 1 foot tall. It had brownish skin, was very wrinkled, and had tufts of gray hair sticking out of its head. It was very squat, almost square-shaped. Its body type resembled a person who looked short and squat in a funhouse mirror. It was also fully clothed, which was a characteristic that totally perplexed me. It wore clothes that looked as if they were handmade. From what I remember, it was wearing simple brown pants and a shirt that resembled peasant clothing from movies about the Middle Ages. It was also wearing small shoes that were tan brown and looked to be made of leather. The thing I remember the most was its beady black eyes. It did not have whites in its eyes like a human. They were just all black. It looked at me for what seemed like forever, but it was probably only a few seconds, and then it turned and quickly darted off. I ran back to my grandpa and yelled, "Grandpa, I saw a little man in the woods." I recalled the other parents just smiling, thinking that it was childish make-believe and nothing more. I forgot about this incident for a long time as I grew up, but one day about 3 years ago, I remembered it. I asked my mom if she remembered me talking about seeing a little man when I was a kid, and she said that she did. I was surprised. My grandfather had passed away a few years before this, but my mom said she remembered that he told her after the game that I had insisted that I had seen a little man in the woods and that I was genuinely scared of something. It was a long time ago and some of the details are hazy, but I do believe I saw something very strange that day. I believe I remembered it so well because I've never felt the way I did when I saw it. I've never been a strong believer in otherworldly or mystical beings. I'd be much more inclined to believe it was a naturally occurring hidden animal, but the feeling that overcame me when I saw it told me that it wasn't a natural creature. The experience seemed to have an almost magical feeling to it, and as far as I honestly know, it really did happen.
It's weird to me when adults just brush stuff like that off.
Yeah, but
The kids saw
that's 'cause
something.
as you get older, your heart dies. I don't know if that's from Breakfast Club.
But
as
I
you get
mean-
older, you get that sense of wonder bashed out of your head.
My first thought was, did my kid just encounter some creepy dude in the woods? Like, I wouldn't just brush it off.
Yeah, it's possible.
But maybe it was a different. How long ago was this? Maybe it was a totally different time when we didn't worry about stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's the same with ghosts too, where they brush off kids seeing ghosts. They brush kids off with everything. Another Reddit story. I was in my 20s and dating a guy that loved camping and hiking like I did. We took a trip to visit some of his friends in Kentucky. The couple lived on 150 acres in the middle of the Daniel Boone National Forest. The road to their house, the quote road to their house, was a graded one-lane drive that meandered through deep woods. Neighbors were few and far between. When we got to the house, I felt like I had reached some sort of haven. They lived in a cleared, this sounds so nice, they lived in a cleared part of the land. The man built log cabins for a living and he had built theirs. They lived entirely off the grid with no electricity, a generator for emergencies, a wood stove, and water piped in from a crystal clear creek that flowed from a cave on the property. The cave was filled with native petroglyphs. This entire area just felt magical. The cabin was surrounded by the woman's gardens. They grew all of their own fruit and vegetables, and flowers were everywhere. The yard was generous, and cleared areas were filled with lush grass. The edge of the, quote, lawn met a tree line, and the creek was right there on the other side of the trees. We were stretching from the long drive, and the woman was showing me her gardens. The bed closest to the edge of the lawn area until the tree line had all kinds of things planted. I listened to her speak about everything she grew and canned there, absorbed by her enthusiasm and her sweet Kentucky accent. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a huge insect hovering around my shoulder height. I tried to ignore it, but it persisted, darting away and then coming back to hover. When I finally turned to look at the bug, I remember gasping out loud. It was a tiny little being hovering right near me. He had short, dark hair, and his clothes looked like leaves. They were that green color. His wings were flapping incredibly fast, like a hummingbird. As I stood there with my mouth open in shock, he put his hands up to his ears, closed his eyes, stuck out his tongue, and went at me, then darted off. I thought I was seeing things. I was completely sober when this happened. I turned to look at my host, and she saw my surprised face, and she asked, quote, "Did you see one of our fairies? Now we'll be able to see the lights tonight." Sure enough, we sat on the porch that evening. The far lawn had these lights that would show up on the grass, rise into the air, and then come back down to the grass. They weren't fireflies. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen. My boyfriend and I camped in a tent outside, and when I woke up the next morning, I took a barefoot walk around, looking at all the flowers and wading in the creek. In my wanderings, I found a perfectly formed fairy circle in the grass. I've seen a lot of weird stuff in my life, but that was the most magical experience I've ever had. I am convinced that the couple put so much in respect and love into their land that it invited that kind of magical presence. And I believe that fairies are interdimensional, which is why we rarely see them and we could never find remains, etc. So I love that story.
Yeah, that's a really cool story.
But that's
I would
what
love an experience
that sounds like what a
that.
pixie is like. Just this
Yeah.
little, like a little annoying brother or
trickster.
sister that
Sticking its tongue out.
Yep.
Giving you raspberries.
Yep.
Is it me?
Yep.
More from Reddit. When I was pretty young, my grandmother on my dad's side had bought me a small playhouse that she kept in her yard, and I would play in whenever I went over there, during the warm months at least. I kept other toys that stayed in her house there as well. She never believed me and thought I was just making things up to get myself out of trouble like kids do. Around early mid-spring, toys would go missing from my playhouse. She would always blame the neighborhood kids or me and say I was just making excuses. But I told her it was because leprechauns, that's what I called them at least, were taking the things. Of course, I can't really blame her for not believing me, but I didn't just come up with that story out of nowhere. I saw it. I was still pretty young, as I mentioned, so I wasn't allowed out past dark, but I loved lightning bugs. I still do, actually, but that's beside the point. Since they usually come out right around when I'd be called inside, I'd often watch them through the windows. On at least one occasion, I saw what I thought was a lightning bug moving sort of strangely, bobbing more than flying, and the light was constant instead of intermittent. I thought it was just some super firefly and got excited and stood on my toes to get a better look at it. Turns out the light was constant because it was the light of a pipe. And a small little man with a beard and hat, not a pointed one, but more of a flattish one.
That sounds like a typical leprechaun.
Yeah.
I can see like a
little hat.
Yeah.
Was scurrying across the yard, carrying what looked like one of those small rubber ducks I'd left in the playhouse. I loved rubber ducks. I don't know why, so I had quite a few. Anyway, I got my grandma's attention and tried to show her, but of course by then it had disappeared. That's when I started telling her that that's what caused my toys to go missing. That is really weird. Like it's stealing his rubber ducks.
Yep.
Another story. It wasn't when I was a kid. I was full grown in my 20s, about 7 years back. I was sitting in my friend's garden, enjoying the sun on my back as I relaxed on a stump. Something tugged on my hair gently. I heard wings flapping and a little chattering noise like I've never heard. I was looking at the ground and I could see my shadow, and I saw something too big to be a bug with what looked like arms and legs shadowed next to my head. I turned just fast enough to see a glimmer of blue flash away, and it was gone. I don't know if it was actually a fairy, but the chattering sounds it made sure sounded like a tiny laugh.
I love that you could only see the shadow of it, and then when you turn to look at it, it's gone.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time in my backyard just hanging out. Let
me know if you get your hair tugged, because you need a fairy home back there.
I know, but we have lots of like flowers and stuff planted out there.
Do you really want fairies? Do you really want pixies in your backyard?
Another story. I swear that I saw a dryad out in the woods one day. That's not how I thought it would be spelled. I thought it'd be I-80.
No, it's Y-80.
It was only for a split second, but I saw a tree person whose skin matched the bark of the trees around it step from behind one tree and disappear behind another.
It's really creepy to me for some reason.
A little bit. They were both small, thin trees, so it shouldn't have been physically possible for a person to do that.
All right.
Kurt reads the rest.
Kurt reads the rest.
So I can close that.
I have a lot of stories, and what we don't get to is going to end up in a leftover stories episode.
Okay.
From Reddit. I was watching some documentary where fae were mentioned, and it made me think of this weird experience I had like 10 or 12 years ago living in Northwest Florida. It's not a story I share a lot because it sounds completely ridiculous. If someone told me this happened to them, I'd probably be like, yeah, okay, sure. But I'm sharing it now because I'm curious to see if anything about my experience rings true to any other fae encounters or lore, and if it wasn't fae, then what was it? So it was an early afternoon / late morning during the summer, and I was standing on my porch, or it's actually a balcony about 7 feet off the ground. After watering my plants, catnip, rosemary, basil, etc., I see what I thought was a large wasp flying towards me from the woods next to my house, and it's flying fast. But the closer it got, it started to look more humanish. What I first thought were long wasp antennas started to look more like small human arms and legs. And it's gold, not yellow, not brown, gold. I also had the impression that it was fleeing something. I can't really describe its face other than it had large eyes because it was looking behind its back most of the time while it flew. And again, this all happened so fast. When I say large eyes, I mean unnaturally large, almost too big for its face. Oddly, I can't remember the color either. Then all of a sudden this thing flies into my cheek and kind of bounces off and kept flying. It looked back behind it again and then looked at me for a split second and then kind of bounced off and started flying away, almost as if it was being chased by something trying to get away from whatever was in that woods. Then it looked forward and flew to the next closest tree that was maybe 4 feet away from me, and it literally disappeared right into the tree. Like I said, it was gold, so I would have seen if it was crawling around on the bark, but it was like whatever this was just melted into the tree, and then it was gone. I was left kind of standing there like, what did I just see? With an odd feeling like I was not supposed to see that. There was something strange about that house and property. Even my boyfriend, who's a pretty big skeptic, remembers that house as being an odd place. But like I said, if anything about this encounter hits close to home for anyone, let me know. And somebody replied and said, a while ago I found a YouTube compilation of someone reading stories from a few different fae encounters from around the internet. The story of a tiny humanoid fleeing from something and bumping into the person telling the story is actually really common among the fae stories. It sounds like maybe they can potentially disguise themselves from human eyes, but they can't bother to do that when they're in distress. So I love that story. It freaked me out a little bit if I saw that. This isn't my story, but it's my little brother's, who to this day swears that he saw a pixie at the bottom of our garden. He was playing with some toys, action figures, in the mud when he saw one of the toys move independently out of the corner of his eye, and when he turned to look directly at it, it was being held by what he described as a child with an old face, and he says it had wings. It smiled at him and then turned and ran away with his figure. It was odd because we ended up finding the toy by the river, which was a short walk from the house the day after. His story has never changed. Somebody else on Reddit writes, in the year 2005, I was sitting on my front porch on a nice summer day when I was compelled to get up and go over and sit in the grass of the front yard. There was no breeze at all that day, but all of a sudden I noticed that the blades of grass started bending in different directions. And then I saw two little fairies. They were very small and sort of two-dimensional. They were so small that they could fit on your fingernail. And one was a boy, one was a girl. And they were kind of weirdly froggy looking, like they had a kind of frog faces. And a little girl one had on a tutu and pointed ballet slippers and was going from the top of a blade of grass, jumping to another blade of grass in her slippers. The other one, the boy, had on shorts and little suspenders, and he was just walking along the tops of the blades of grass.
How big were they? They had to be tiny.
Yeah, like your fingernail.
Wow.
Yeah. And as quickly as this appeared to me, they were gone. So I couldn't see the blades of grass moving anymore, and I could no longer see these creatures. That's so weird.
Yeah.
You know? Another one. One night around 4 a.m. in Fort Myers, Florida, I was outside with my significant other, and we encountered something. It whistled like a person. It had wings that looked like dragonfly wings, but there was nothing for a body. So imagine a green pair of dragonfly-looking wings hovering in the air with nothing attached to them. It whistled like it was trying to get our attention. It flew in front of us for a few good seconds, no more than 2 feet away, and it felt like it definitely had an intelligence about it. Mind you, it was kind of raining, and this thing was hovering in the rain completely unfazed. So yeah, that's my story. The fact that my significant other witnessed the same exact thing is confirmation that I didn't imagine it. We both know what we saw that night, and it was not from this world. And then somebody else writes, quote, sigh, I run the risk of pissing it off, but yes, we have a fae friend that lives in our house. I'm fairly sure it resides in or around the house we live in. It likes to mimic things in the house. Multiple times we have seen duplicates of our cat, which is usually what it does.
Weird.
However, it's tried to copy our corgi a few times and couldn't get it right for some reason. The end result was an anthropomorphic corgi-like being. That's so creepy.
It's like AI.
Yeah, it's like like glitching, like it's trying to become the corgi, but it can't. The first time I saw it, it looked as surprised at me as I was looking at it, like it was surprised I was able to see it.
That would be terrifying.
I've heard that the fae don't like being talked about, so when I do talk about it verbally, like clockwork, it will wake our 1-year-old in the middle of the night. I'm hoping that since I'm typing this, it maybe won't mind or won't know. And somebody replies and said, I heard they're tricksters like that. Does it mimic anyone else in the house? When I was a kid, my mom and I would hear each other calling to each other from the other rooms, only to learn that neither of us had done that. Always thought it was weird, but never attributed it to the fae. I didn't even know about the fae back then. So do you ever hear your baby crying or your husband/wife calling to you only to find out it's really not them?
For some reason, the fae makes it less creepy.
Yeah, it does. And then somebody else writes, quote, funny you should say that. I at times think I hear my oldest daughter talking in her room when I'm home alone. Also, my wife and I sometimes try to spook each other when we are in the bathroom by running our fingernails across the wood door. Well, the other day I was home from work early, no one was home, and someone ran their nails across the door. It sounded just like my wife's nails. I loudly went, nope, and locked the door. She came home 2 hours later. So there you go. Should we end her there?
Sure.
Yeah, I have a bunch more stories. They will be in a stories episode in the future. But it's just like weird. Like, I don't know.
A lot of commonalities between all of these stories.
So many commonalities. I have a ton more. I have a lot of stories about pixies and stuff like that. This one weirdly resonated. This one's really short, but this one weirdly resonated with me, and I don't know why. I'm like, did I see this when I was a kid? But the story just said, somebody writes on Reddit, when I was a little girl, I would see small people, no more than 6 inches in height, walk in a line along the floor against the wall of my bedroom like they were marching. They were dressed in medieval-style peasant clothing and looked like they were carrying things like pitchforks. It was like this weird parade of small, shadowy creatures. I ran into my parents' room and slept after I saw that, and then I would see them in there too. I told myself it was my imagination, but I can't explain why I would imagine that. And that dredged up like a weird feeling for me. So I don't know what that means. I have absolutely no idea. But yeah, there's a ton more stories, and I just find them super fascinating.
Yeah.
But again, you can see that there was like this crossover with mimics. So it's like, are the fae mimics?
Well, like I said, it makes it feel a little less creepy if it were fae.
like I've become like really strangely obsessed with the fae. Like, I love it. I'm gonna keep digging into it, and we'll have more episodes because there's so many different types of fae that I didn't talk about. elves. We'll talk about with Iceland, but there's banshees, which are considered part of the Fae.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there's so many different types. So this will probably be the first of other episodes. But if you are interested, there is a really good podcast called the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast. I can't remember much about it. I know that it's got to be from Great Britain because they have an accent, but it's people calling in with like sightings like this. And it's just really interesting. Like, I love it. So what do you think, Fae folk?
I feel like there's something going on. How can this many people be having these
like
experiences?
I hardcore bought into this the more I read it. I'm like, this exists. I don't know. I really like the idea of nature energy, like Bigfoot being a guardian of the forest or being a part of the forest. Pixies being like a part of nature. Like, I love pixies. Like, pixies, I think that's so cute.
As with anything, I feel like I need to experience it to fully believe it, but it's definitely fascinating and intriguing.
Yeah, like, I love it, and I love the Reddit stories about it, and there's surprisingly a lot of them, but again, it's Reddit, so...
Yeah.
But even if one of these we talked about is true, the flute playing in the woods creeps me out.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Leaving DC, which I think we're going to talk about on a side session.
Yeah.
But yeah, singing in the woods wouldn't creep me out, I think, as much as the music.
Yeah, the flute. Because it's normal human behavior to sing to yourself, but who walks around with a flute?
Yeah, exactly.
That's just a little less common.
On the going against that, I didn't include them in here, but there were stories that started like this, and then they get up in the trail, and there's a dude there with a flute, and he's like, "I come out here to practice because it sounds good, and there's nobody out here." So I mean, all these do have just because you hear the flute, it can be they were joking with the
really
guy
funny,
saying that the
actually.
guy will write on Reddit one day and said, I was playing the flute in the woods and I heard movement all around me and people walking. So it does happen that there are people singing in the woods. Some people said they purposely go out to sing in the woods so they don't disturb anybody in their house. So there are logical explanations for all these, but at 3:00 in the morning, hearing a flute and then hearing it outside your window, I don't know.
Yeah, no.
I don't know.
That part, no.
But I have totally bought into the Fae folk thing. Like, I love it. I really do. And it's going to be a rabbit hole that I'm going to continue to go down for a while.
I love the idea of a world where these things exist.
Yeah, I do too. But the pixies yanking on somebody's hair or tying knots in people's hair when they're sleeping. Like, I think that's so cool. So there you go. There's an introduction to the Fae folk. And hopefully I didn't annoy them by talking about them. So,
yeah, same.
But this was the first thing I thought of with our incident the other day.
Yeah.
With
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that next episode about our missing time or whatever. So my song for this week, surprise, surprise, New Crush.
Okay.
Sometimes the YouTube algorithm is so much better than the Facebook one. Like, the YouTube algorithm just like always picks something good for me. So I'm shallow. I admit I'm shallow. I saw the thumbnail and I'm like, oh, she's cute. I'm going to listen to this. And I listened to it and I just loved it. And she's a crush of mine now, and I want to go to lunch with her and her dad because I adore her dad.
Okay.
So some of the YouTube comments, I'm only going to do 4 from this song. If you're a younger person or like know modern music, you probably know this song. But some of the YouTube comments, somebody writes, quote,
I feel like I'm not going to know this
No.
song.
I'm obsessed with her facial expressions in the video. Her acting is top tier. Somebody else writes, quote, this song is the epitome of, quote, I love you and I don't even know you. I'm so here for this. Somebody else writes, quote, if I could marry a song, I would pick this one. And somebody else writes, quote, if you don't sing along and yell the line, too soon to tell you I love you, when she does, we are not friends and never will be. And it is the song Risk by Gracie Abrams. Her dad is J.J. Abrams, who I absolutely love because of Felicity. Because
didn't he do Lost?
Lost and Felicity and Cloverfield, like that's all J.J. Like I've watched. He has a TED Talk that's really good about magic box, which is what a lot of people associate with him as the magic box idea. And he says that, and that's what Lost was. Like there's this mystery that you don't know what's happening, and that's what draws people to watch it. And I love him just because of Felicity. Like him and another guy like came up with Felicity. So I absolutely love it. So I actually, and that Gracie Abrams is his daughter. And I just really like her, and it's obviously like the Taylor Swift guitar singing
okay.
kind of thing. But she's so adorable in this video. Like, I just love Gracie Abrams, and I would love to meet her dad. And so I bought the album, and I've been listening nonstop to her album. And the other day, I was sobbing watching Felicity. So I've come to the conclusion that I have the soul of a 14-year-old girl. I 100% have the soul of a 14-year-old girl, and I'm cool with that. So that is the song for this episode, Risk by Gracie Abrams. And I didn't put it on here, but we got an interesting question.
Oh, we did? Okay.
We did. Somebody writes and asks, hang on here. Hi, Kurt and Krista. I love your podcast, but you guys are way too nice. Say something mean about somebody else that has a podcast.
No.
That was their comment.
I mean, I'm not very nice about Zach Bagans. Have you ever heard me say anything nice about Zach Bagans?
No. I thought about this. And
I don't like putting other people's podcasts down.
The only thing I could come up for this, and I love this podcast, their podcast. I really do.
So you were not even capable of being
No, and I'm not saying this is mean, but sometimes Derek Hayes from Monsters Among Us, sometimes his voice annoys me, and I don't know why. But the weird thing is, and I love the podcast, I love Derek Hayes, so I'm not throwing shade, but sometimes it just, what I think bothers me about it is that I used to listen to Blurry Photos podcast, which is about like paranormal stuff too. And there was one time where they had a bunch of guests, and I did not realize till 3/4 of the way through that Derek Hayes was one of them, because he uses a different voice for the podcast, like a scarier voice, like a deeper, scarier voice. When you hear him talk,
he does a podcast
you would
voice?
never in a million years know that it's him. So there's something about that I don't like. You know what I mean? Like, if you do a podcast, use
just be
your voice.
yourself.
And that just grates on me, and I don't know why. And it's nothing against him, and it's nothing against his podcast, because I love Monsters Among Us. But I just don't like that, and I don't know why. So that's the only mean thing I could think. And that's not even mean towards him. That's just me being weird with that, and I don't know why. So Derek, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I'm not throwing shade. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't know.
You and I are not people to be mean to other people's podcasts.
Well, and I just feel like the paranormal community
is already so snipey and
there's no
petty.
place for it.
Speaking of 14-year-old girls,
I mean,
that's what it's like, a lot of drama, like
Yeah,
teenagers.
right. I feel like we should be supporting each other, not tearing each other down. There's no point in it. You're not going to get bigger or make more money because you ripped someone else's podcast.
No, but Tobias deals with that all the time. Like,
I know,
people throwing
and I don't
shade.
understand.
And like, I don't, that's one of the reasons why I feel like you and I don't want to get more involved with the paranormal community and do
I don't want to be the
conventions
target
and stuff,
of
because we would
anything.
100%. I think that we would be greatly unliked by a lot of other people. And I think part of that comes from the fact that you and I are this.
We're not afraid to say if we don't believe something or if we think it's...
but we're also genuine, and I think that would annoy other people. I don't know why I think that, but like, you and I aren't... I've thought about that a lot since I read that question. I think that's why I don't want to do conventions and stuff and interact with other groups, because I feel like we'd get laughed at. And I don't know why I feel like that, but that's just like, look at these schlubs.
I think we have imposter syndrome a little bit. Do you know what that means?
No, I don't.
A lot of people feel it around work. I definitely do. Imposter
like, we don't
syndrome,
deserve this?
You don't
Like,
deserve what you
No,
have.
I don't. I 100% don't feel like we deserve our
Same.
list. Like, you and I are always bad mouthing.
Like, why does anybody watch this or listen to this?
I didn't know that was a thing. But you and I 100% have imposter syndrome. Like, I feel like we don't deserve this.
Yeah.
You know,
if anything, we're mean to ourselves, but we're not mean to anybody else.
No, and that was literally the only thing I could think of, is that it bothers me that he doesn't use his actual voice. You know, like an attempt to be scarier.
Spookier.
So that's, and I still love him and his podcast, but that's like, you
See,
and
I'm more apt to watch the YouTube channel than listen to the podcast, The Monsters Among Us.
I listen to it when I drive. That's the only time I can listen to podcasts. You know, I told you I tried watching Haunted Objects podcast on YouTube, and it's just hard for me because I fall asleep. But if I'm driving, I don't fall asleep usually.
I love the visuals. I love just seeing what they're talking about and facial expressions, and you miss out on a lot.
But them saying you and I are too nice, that's us. we
Yeah.
are not.
That's us
we are
in a
not.
nutshell.
We are not here to throw. We'll throw the occasional shade, like when you and I are in the car.
Yeah.
You know,
off mic.
But I got to edit all of our because
we would never say that stuff on the podcast, because
I had our EVP watch going while we were on our drive both ways.
To Whitewater.
To listen to our conversation. So if there's like enough that is good, we're going to have that as the next side sessions where it's basically just going to be listening to Krista and I driving while we talk.
Yeah.
Talking while we drive.
I feel like I feel like you have to really do something for us to throw shade, though.
Yeah.
You got to step out of line big time.
Yeah, totally. Like you and I are not the kind of people that we're Wisconsin nice. We're not going to talk.
We are. We're Midwest nice.
But it's also not because we're trying to be nice. It's just because
we're from the Midwest.
We're from the Midwest. You know, there are podcasts
nice.
that I've listened to that I can't stand because, like I said, it sounds like it was recorded on somebody's old iPod Touch across the room from them,
or they have
and the
no
sound
chemistry,
is so bad, or they have no chemistry.
Whatever. Yeah.
But I'm not going to talk crap about them because. This is hard.
They're working.
Doing this. They're doing something they love. Like, I'm not going to...
Right.
Like, you and I aren't good
this
at talking crap about somebody. And if I do, then I feel bad about it for like a week that I said something vaguely bad about somebody. So that was all I could come up with. You can't even come up with anything other than Zach Bagans.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's like...
We're not popular enough for him to target me for doing that. So
no,
I'm okay with that.
I think we're safe. So there you go. Thank you, listener, for sending that in. Sorry we weren't more mean.
Tune into another podcast if that's what you want.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not what that listener meant, though.
No, but I think
it
was tongue in cheek, but that's just us.
So thanks for the compliment.
I can hear Lucy up there.
She's been whining for like 10 minutes.
She's probably got the Faye up there with her.
Probably.
But yeah, our next episode will be
the Whitewater trip.
The Whitewater, and I think the one after that is the one we already recorded.
Maybe.
I think so.
Not sure. Have to look at that calendar that we haven't.
My friend Marcy gave me a taste test item for next time.
Okay, there might be something in this box.
Yes, there is something in that box. I didn't want to bring hers with this because that would have been too much sugar.
Yeah. Okay.
Hers is a sugary thing too. So there you go. There is the Fae and whatnot. So I'm fascinated by it. I love it. Let us know what you guys think.
Do you guys have any Fae encounter stories?
Yeah, like especially if you had a Fae encounter, because I want to hear more about Fae encounters, and I'm on the fence about whether I want to encounter them or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
depends
so
on the kind.
I'm gonna keep going out to my little log in the woods by my trail and leaving like little gifts for them.
Not in plastic. Not
in plastic, no. But I love that it was still there, so I could pick it up and take it away. Mm-hmm. I don't know if my crystal is still there that I left for them, but we'll see. You know, it's probably
somebody's probably walking through the woods. Ooh,
look
crystal.
at this! Why is there? Did the Fae leave this on a log for me? I'll take that. So thank you guys so much for listening. This is going to be about 2 hours long, so I was pretty much on the mark. I have a lot more stories left, so there will be a stories episode coming up at some point. If you hear flute sounds in the woods, record it for us. Yeah, walk the other way, but record it for us. Mm-hmm. Get us some audio. And I feel like there's something else we were going to say, but I can't think of nothing.
Just the deets.
You are going to Holy Hill today.
Yep.
Hope you have a good time.
Hope it's not too hot.
Hope it's not. It's not going to be hot, but it's the humidity that I think is going to be bad the next couple days. I am staying at Corey's house tonight because they are camping, so I always love staying at his house. You can email us at thestrangesessions@gmail.com. We are on Instagram, where Krista does an amazing job at The Strange Sessions. Love our Instagram listeners. You can send postcards and snail mail to The Strange Sessions, P.O. Box 434, Manitowoc, Wisconsin, 54221-0434. We got another letter from Matthew Thornton. I'm going to take these all home and open them.
We have a stack.
I know. I'm going to take these home and open them.
Make heads or tails.
I wish I had a scanner that I could scan them.
Yeah.
Tiana, hey Tiana, she showed a great interest in being our intern. But I told her we don't really know what being our intern entails.
Right.
We'd like somebody to go through our past episodes and
catalog everything.
Catalog who we got gifts from, catalog what songs we've listened to.
Especially the who we got gifts from.
I think Corey started doing this. He had a spreadsheet, so I got to ask Corey if he still has that.
And if all of a sudden all these people independently want to start doing that, maybe talk to each other so that 5 different people aren't doing the work.
Yeah. I told Krista, I'm also doing a thing now where
I don't expect anyone to
I downloaded an app where I put all of our old show notes in a folder on my computer, and the app goes through and catalogs what's all in there. Like, so I can open it and do a search saying like flute in woods, and it'll show me that we've already talked about stories with flute. Like, it'll show me what we've already talked about. So that's going to be kind of a help so I don't repeat myself.
I also really want to upload your show notes to the Ko-fi site.
Yeah.
I keep
forgetting to do that too. I also want to print out the show notes so we can sign them as a little gift. Not like it'll be worth anything, but There's the imposter syndrome again. Now that I know it has a name for
Yep.
it. So thank you guys. Oh, did I finish this stuff? Phone number. You can call our lonely phone number at 920-443-9602. We haven't gotten a listener. We haven't gotten a phone call in a while. And you can send listener stories to the Strange Sessions Stories at gmail.com. There's nothing in there lately. I looked.
And are those all the links? For
Yes.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Send
I got
those
all the
to me.
links.
Are they in? No, they weren't in the email you sent me. So if you could email them
I will
to me
email
today.
those to you.
Because
Wow,
I need to
so
post
demanding.
today. Well, hey, this comes out tomorrow, people.
Plus, I came here and the house is such a mess. I can't even. I can't even.
Oh, now you need to explain that.
There's a little inside joke because apparently Krista was upset that the house.
There are a couple things on the dining room table, and
Yeah,
I don't like clutter.
We came in and Jim apologized to me, and I'm like, I can't even do a podcast at this house. This is horrible. We're gonna need.
Work in
We're
these
done with this
conditions.
podcast. I cannot work under these conditions.
We did clean the house
The
yesterday.
house is fine. Oh my God, it is never
I
messy.
have standards.
Should be in my apartment. A brownie would come in my apartment and just shake its head at me and be like, "No, this is a mess. I am not going to be living here." So there you go. Let us know what you guys think, and I think that is it because now I'm kind of rambling.
Yeah.
So, from Krista and I, thank you guys so much for listening. We love you guys
And for watching.
and for subscribing. Our subscribers paid for our trip to Whitewater.
Yeah.
And they
And
paid
our lunch.
and our
for the
amazing
gas.
lunch. Our amazing lunch. The
We got
gas.
some T-shirts.
We'll be wearing our Whitewater T-shirts
Yep.
in the next episode. So thank you, subscribers. It was really nice.
We're like, hey, we should use this money.
Yeah, it was so nice to have that. Like we didn't have to worry about anything
Right.
that day.
Yeah.
So thank
Very
you for
cool.
everything you guys do for us. We love you. So from Krista and I, until next time, stay strange. Cool beans.